All right, folks, welcome back to Revenge of the Drive-In. We've had a couple weeks off, but we are back with a vengeance. We are, of course, brought to you by the Grandma Sophia's Podcast Network, something that I just realized now doesn't really work after we said we're back with a vengeance, but whatever. I am your host, Patrick, and I am joined here by...
Do I say my name?
I was expecting you to.
Okay, my name is Feck.
You have guested on this show before.
Twice, right?
Yeah, you did Body Double and Ghoulies. Returning fans of the show may know you as North America's biggest Ghoulie fan.
That's right. That's exactly right.
What was the other one you were on? Oh, Grizzly and Vice Academy, of course.
Weird episodes.
Well, first off, Face Off and The Blair Witch Project. Not as weird in terms of both movies. Neither of them are obscure.
It's a weird pairing, though.
It is a weird pairing.
I guess we'll get into that later.
But they're both blockbusters, and it's interesting. Face Off, kind of a traditional blockbuster, and The Blair Witch Project, very, very non-conforming blockbuster. And
both 90s.
Yes, yeah, within 2 years. 97 is Face Off, and 99 is The Blair Witch Project.
So that, on that basis, it makes sense.
I'm just going to start off right off the bat saying both of these movies are great. I think I had only seen Face Off once before, but I remembered loving it. And seeing it again, definitely still really enjoy it. And Blair Witch Project, I swear, it gets better every time I see it. It really is just a masterclass in found footage horror filmmaking.
The first time I saw Face Off, I saw my mom the next day, and she said, I said something like, I was watching Face Off last night with my friends, and she was like, oh yeah, I liked that. It's a little far-fetched, though.
Yeah, of course.
I was like, oh yeah, it's a little far-fetched. Just a little bit.
Well, that's kind of the weird thing with Face Off, is that it's a sci-fi movie, but it's only sci-fi in, like, two components. It's very strange, and apparently I was reading a little bit about this. It sounds like the script had changed quite a bit at some point, maybe more than one point, but at one point it was going to be set in the future.
That makes a lot more sense.
It makes a lot more sense, and then they just got rid of that, but they kept the sci-fi elements it does have, which is kind of weird, but...
I don't know. It sounds like how they're trying to do Face Off 2, and they keep rewriting the script for it.
Okay, yeah, I heard something about Face Off 2 at some point. Do you have any details? Does anyone have any details? Because I don't know how that works.
So apparently they wrote a script that was just like a reboot with completely different characters, but it was like the same idea. But then after Pig and now The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent...
Cage is hot.
Right, so Cage is hot. So the guy who's writing it said they completely rewrote the script to make it a direct sequel to the original.
Which still doesn't make sense.
No, I think that's crazy.
Spoilers. You can't have both Cage and Travolta back in the next movie. It doesn't make any sense, but whatever.
When I heard this initially, I said the same thing, but I was rewatching it with this in mind, and I don't know, they could maybe make it work.
Okay.
Like, Face Off already doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
They could write it in like a Fast and Furious type way, like of just whatever. He just didn't die.
Okay.
He actually went into a coma or something like that.
Okay.
Spoiler,
anyways,
I guess, but
Well, you didn't say who is the he, though.
Yeah, you're right.
And it gets confusing once you watch the movie, of course, too, as to who is the
true.
he. But Face Off.
For years, I've been watching him, tracking him, studying his every move. I know his every mannerism, facial tic, gesture. I know him better than he knows himself. And now, after all this time, I finally figured out a way to trap him. I will become him.
1997, directed by action filmmaker extraordinaire John Woo, Hong Kong filmmaker. I don't think he's making American films anymore, and, I don't think I've seen the earlier films he did, the earlier American films he did before this.
Right.
But I saw Mission Impossible 2 when I was a kid, and I'm going to say I think that might be a good thing, him not making American movies. I mean, again, the caveat here being I love Face Off, I do. His style is far more suited to Hong Kong cinema. But I also think in the 90s, that was like a breath of fresh air for American action movies.
Yeah.
with greater visibility for a lot of foreign films and stuff. Action filmmakers, think of like the John Wick series. They're borrowing a little bit from like The Raid and that one scene in Old Boy, and it's a lot of Asian influence. In the 90s, that was a pretty new thing. This predates The Matrix, because The Matrix also is another Asian-influenced big-budget blockbuster action movie.
And also 99, like Blair Witch.
97. We just talked about how Nick Cage is hot now with Mandy. You mentioned Pig. A lot of these movies that maybe aren't necessarily big, but they're critically acclaimed.
Right. And they're the ones that are billed as like more serious and mature.
Yes, not your typical Nicolas Cage kind of thing necessarily. But 1997, Nick Cage had never been bigger.
Right.
Wins the Academy Award in 95 or 96 for Leaving Las Vegas.
Right.
Then he's got Con Air. Con Air came out the same month as Face Off. I think it came out like 2 weeks before.
That's
or something.
crazy. I didn't know that.
And so Con Air was a big movie. Right. This is a big movie. Is he in The Rock? Because I get The Rock and Con Air mixed up.
He's definitely... I mean, he's the main character in Con Air. I don't remember him in The Rock, but I don't really remember The Rock that well, so...
If he is in The Rock, that came out in 96, the year before this, so...
Right. He was on a hot streak. He was on a tear.
I think anyone talking about prime Nick Cage, or any good Nicolas Cage movie, really has to start off by saying it's 2022... And unfortunately, we still have to explain to people that Nicolas Cage is a good actor. Like, that's something that hasn't gotten through to a lot of people still.
It's because it became like a meme to
exactly.
like just his facial expressions. And then it's like, now all of a sudden the like expressionism became like it's all a joke and it's actually like really cheesy and bad, but it's not.
And you throw in all the bullshit movies, quite frankly, that he
all
made
the dollar store movies. I mean, people view the fact that he does those as a reason why he's a bad actor, like he can't get big movies or something when he can.
And in actuality, I think I've heard he's just like constantly in debt, so he'll just do any movie.
That's exactly what it is.
which is amazing in and of itself. But yeah, yes. All those Willy's Wonderlands and those. Ironically, the movies that John Travolta is in, those kinds of movies, the Liam Neeson movies, like those are kind of all shitty. But no, Nicolas Cage is really talented.
Right.
He needs the right material, which that's true of most actors. How many actors out there are good no matter what they're in? It's
Brad Dourif.
Brad Dourif is not a bad example. I would say like Meryl Streep or someone.
Right,
but then again,
I don't know why that's the first thing that came to my head.
Brad Dourif's talented. Yeah.
Just because I watched Critters 4, which is not a good movie, but I'm captivated.
Well, anyways, Face Off, to start off the movie, opening scene is amazing. It's John Travolta playing with his kid on a carousel, and Nicolas Cage, sporting an excellent mustache, snipes him, shoots through his like shoulder blade, and the bullet continues and hits his 5-year-old son. John Travolta survives, but his son dies. So like right off the bat, it's like, ooh, this is something.
Yeah, that opening scene is, I don't know. I don't want to say it's funny because it's really tragic, but it's
very melodramatic.
Really, yeah,
it's that kind of makes it funny. And this is
right.
I don't claim to be a John Woo expert by any means. I did mention some of his other American films, but we should point out, obviously, Hong Kong filmmaker. A lot of people say Hard Boiled is one of the greatest action movies ever. That came out in 92.
Right.
I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I would also throw more love to The Killer, 1989. I think that movie is amazing. I prefer that even to Hard Boiled. But his Asian films, a lot of them fall under the genre of heroic bloodshed,
right?
Which is this, gun fu, the heroic bloodshed. It's a lot of Hong Kong gangsters. It's a lot of shooting. It's a lot of really, really over dramatic stuff. Maybe over dramatic is too harsh a word, but just very, very high stakes drama. The drama, I think, kind of might clash a bit with the action, you might say.
Yeah, I mean, I think this scene, I think what's funny about it is that the rest of the movie, even like the over dramatic parts, feel like kind of tongue in cheek, or like it's so silly, like you're not supposed to take serious. But this one scene feels really like serious, and I think it's just funny because it's just like it's really melodramatic. But I love it. It's great.
And we haven't really established these characters yet, and especially once we establish the characters, and more than the characters, the performances.
Right.
Once we have those kind of traits, those personality quirks set up, then like nothing is serious. But
right.
It's because this is the ultimate stroke of genius of this film, pairing the two, I would argue, greatest overactors in the history of film against each other. It's amazing. And we said earlier, like, we unfortunately have to remind people that Nicolas Cage is actually a good actor. He's actually talented. One of the reasons people say he isn't is because he is an overactor. But
right.
Overacting isn't always bad. There's a time and a place for it.
Yeah,
I think the example I always go to, and this is, I don't think ever come up in this podcast, but Dennis Hopper in Blue Velvet.
Right, that's one of the greatest cases of overacting. Yeah.
So Nicolas Cage, can do that kind of thing. And then Travolta, too. I think Travolta could act at one point. I don't think he can. I'm not using a present tense with that. But he's given good performances before.
Sure.
And of course here, John Travolta plays Sean Archer. We pick back up after his son has been killed. 6 years later, Sean Archer is, of course, an FBI agent. He is the good guy. We find out later he's had family issues. He and his wife aren't necessarily on great terms. He also has a teenage daughter that doesn't really respect him. Then we have Nicolas Cage playing Castor Troy.
Great name.
From Greco-Roman mythology, because his brother is also named Pollux.
Pollux, right.
They're half-twins in mythology because they have different fathers, but they are considered twins. But they are half-twins. I don't know if they...
Maybe they're half-twins in this movie, too, for all we know.
Brother is, of course, played by Liam Gallagher of the band Oasis.
Right. Yes, that's right.
Doesn't he look exactly like him?
I thought he kind of looked like John Cusack.
Well, anyways, it's Alessandro Nivola. Remind me, by the way, I have another point to make about Liam Gallagher. We'll get to it at the end.
Uh-oh.
Please remind me, because I have a feeling I'll forget about that because I don't have it in my notes. But
okay.
Alessandro Nivola is apparently the dude that played, I think his name was Billy in Jurassic Park 3.
Right, yeah, that's what I recognize.
The worst character in the entire Jurassic franchise, arguably, in one of the worst films I've ever seen. I hate Jurassic Park 3 with a passion. Anyways, we meet back up with Castor Troy, who has planted a bomb at what we later learn is the Los Angeles Convention Center, and he's going around. He's in a priest outfit.
Yeah,
he's singing along to this like religious choir that's there. He's overacting. He is chewing this scenery.
He is,
and
I mean, I don't know.
This is amazing. When I first saw this movie, I was like watching this scene. I'm like, oh, I am so on board.
In.
Yeah,
right.
This is just amazing stuff. And then he goes behind one of the singers and he's like squeezing her ass and doing all these like
he does the face.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he does that. He does like a cum face. It's incredible.
Like I know this is like borderline the first scene of the movie, but this might be the best scene of the movie.
I think I agree. The action scenes are very good, but this is
the whole movie's. But this scene is just so. It hooks you in, and it's like you just know that there's no like there's no rules. I feel like I just felt like that when I was watching this. Like, oh, this movie seemed really self-serious when it started, and I was wondering how it was going to go. And then I see this scene, and I'm like, this could go anywhere.
Yeah, Cage is truly unleashed, and he's unleashed immediately, which is a real great thing. And it actually, I think, works to his favor later when he plays it more subtle, I think, because we get that contrast.
Yeah, that's the kind of cool thing.
Eventually, it's Travolta who gets unleashed.
That's what I like.
I don't think it's as good as Cage Unleashed, but it's fun.
I just think it's cool that I came in to see Cage Unleashed.
Yeah, and Cage is the more entertaining actor,
right? But Travolta, he commands it. Travolta does it.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we'll get to that, but so Sean Archer has been going after Castor Troy since his son's, and probably since even before his son was killed. They finally get a tip that the Troys have hired a private plane, so the plane is about to take off, and all these FBI vehicles show up to try to keep the plane from going off. There is an undercover FBI agent aboard the plane who Castor Troy kills.
After he says that he wants to eat her peach.
Well, and there's a lot of tongue stuff, too.
There's some tongue stuff as well.
He's obsessed with his tongue, yes.
Yeah, people sucking his tongue specifically.
Yes, that's brought up a few times in the film. But so a shootout ensues while the plane's trying to take off. At some point, Archer Travolta gets from a car to a helicopter, and the helicopter basically causes the plane to crash. The helicopter is like on top of the plane, but the plane, before it can take off, ends up crashing, and then there's more of a shootout with the two Troy brothers both jumping out of the plane in the classic. If John Woo is known for two things, it's people jumping in the air and shooting, like diving through the air, not like leaping upward, but like the horizontal, and then also doves. It takes us a long time to get the doves, but we do get them. So this shootout continues. Some cops are killed. One cop's ear is blown off, which is pretty cool.
That was cool. I agree.
Then Pollux Troy is arrested, and it's Castor Troy versus Sean Archer.
A third act feeling
right off the bat, yeah.
Right in the beginning.
You're not having any fun, are you, Sean? Try terrorism for hire. We'll blow some stuff up. It's more fun.
And this is a fun fight.
Yes.
Then Nicolas Cage gets blown into a gate from a plane engine and gets put in a coma. But this is a fun action scene.
That was a great part. The shot of him flying back into that grate, incredible.
Archer thinks things are done. He thinks things can finally go back to normal between him and his wife Eve, played by Joan Allen. Mm-hmm. The bureau at his home office, this is L.A. by the way, is they give him like a bottle of champagne. They're like ready to celebrate, but he stops them. He's like, no, there's nothing to celebrate. We're we have to honor the dead, all the cops that were killed, so it's like, okay, this guy is the ultimate Boy Scout here, really. I mean, it's obviously personal between him and Castor Troy, but it's also about honor. It's about like good and evil to him. Then the film changes genres because this is our sci-fi portion of the film.
Right.
Well, I know I mentioned that Castor Troy mentioned the daughter. Did I also? I can't remember if I also mentioned that he mentioned that there was like a bomb or something. He uses kind of coded language, but he hints at something going down in a few days.
Yeah, he says he's gonna cause a apocalypse in L.A. or something. He says
in Hell A. He says Hell A, I believe. Then the other people at the FBI find that there is indeed a credible threat.
Right.
Seemingly the only one who can help get rid of this bomb is, of course, Pollux Troy, Liam Gallagher, who is in prison, but of course he's not going to talk. I mean, I know he's not a Gallagher brother, but this is a far healthier brother, sibling relationship than Liam Gallagher actually has in real life.
Yeah,
so
well,
this is
definitely
some wish fulfillment if Liam Gallagher actually were in this film. But
I mean, I really think that's the whole point of the character. There's nothing at all that Castor Troy would have to live for or do. Like, he's just like, that's his honor. He doesn't have honor on anything else.
Yeah, Castor Troy doesn't have a code.
Right.
Sean Archer has a code, and he also has the personal vendetta. And Archer, not Archers. I'm getting them mixed up, but that's going to make sense soon enough.
Right,
but
right.
The Castor Troy, if there is a code, it's just really the brother relationship, which eventually becomes the vendetta as well. But Pollux Troy's not going to talk. But it turns out that Castor Troy isn't actually dead. He's in a coma. And Dr. Colmfior has a plan to take off Nicolas Cage's face, put it on, also take off John Travolta's face, and then replace John Travolta's face with Nicolas Cage's.
That's what the movie's about, or, most people do, but, watching this movie, knowing that, it still takes you off guard a little bit when it's introduced. Like, when they suggest it to John Travolta, it's kind of like, it's crazy. Yeah, it's like, okay, I forgot that that's exactly what this movie is.
It's weird, but I will also go back to that action scene on the airstrip.
Yeah.
The stylized action with the jumping through the air and stuff kind of prepares you for something like this, I think, in a way.
I agree, but it also just feels like, again, I'm like referencing Fast and Furious because the action, like it feels like that in that there's all these crazy action scenes that obviously defy logic, make no sense. But I still feel like if something like this were introduced into the Fast and Furious franchise, people would be like, okay, maybe that's a little too far.
Okay, sure. Like, you know, haven't they talked about, like, somewhat jokingly, somewhat not jokingly about doing, like, a Fast and Furious in space or something? And maybe that's full-on jumping the shark. Did they do it?
I got news for you. They went to space in F9. And you know what?
Well, I guess Elon Musk's been to space. Everybody goes to space. That's the thing. Like,
it
Jason's been
you know,
there.
But like that defies logic, but it can happen. You know what I mean? Like the face-off thing is just so like futuristic sci-fi that it would be crazy.
Well, the IMDb trivia will for face-off will remind you that hey, face transplants have actually happened.
I mean, it's not even just the idea of someone putting a face on another face.
It's the switching of the faces.
It's the whole body, and it's the fact that they're able to like get rid of any markings to indicate that it's happened.
Yeah.
You know, everything about it. It's
well, I was just going to say that the IMDb trivia for Face Off did say that the first successful face transplant did indeed happen. I don't know what year it happened, but because they were desperately trying to tie it into the movie, they said the injury that caused this person's face to be disfigured happened the year that this film came out. It's like, okay, come on, that's not related. There's no correlation whatsoever.
Right. And I mean, it's like, I believe that you could put a face on another person. It's just like really the scene that gets me is when they show the ear like being 3D printed.
Yeah, they predicted 3D printing basically. Yeah. That's kind of neat.
And that like plays into the whole thing. Like you can't have this face transplant without the 3D printing technology that they're utilizing.
Okay, so Sean Archer essentially becomes Castor Troy. They do a little thing where he's got the voice that they mention, like if he scratches his throat or if something happens, like it would probably go back to his own voice, but he does, the first couple lines he has, it's Travolta's voice, but eventually they like test it out a bit and make sure that it's calibrated perfectly to be Nicolas Cage's voice. So from here on, when I say Archer, when I say Sean Archer, it is Nicolas Cage.
Right.
Okay, this is important. So the plan is he goes into the prison that Pollux Troy is being held at, and they said it's 6 days before the bomb goes off, but he's got 2 days to get the information, and then he'll be picked up. And only a few people know about this.
Yeah,
his family doesn't know.
That's the downfall of this whole plan. I mean, that will become the downfall of this whole plan too. But also, that's just when I was watching it, like, why would you not tell anyone about this? Like, I know it's crazy, but
I can sort of understand the family not knowing. Well, how does normal undercover police officer stuff
it seems like just
work?
5 people knew or something like that.
I think
it seemed like
I think 4
team.
Because I think when Nicolas Cage burns those guys, I think it's 4 people. But yeah,
so I was like, that's the real blunder. But you would think that they would have anything in place for him to prove that he is who he says he is.
Sure.
In the event that something goes wrong and he can't get back in his own body or face or whatever.
Yeah, for even for the prison guards.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. Because he could very well go to this prison and it could be extremely corrupt and they could just kick his ass because he's Castor Troy, or just want to kill him, or make, like things happen sometimes where like maybe they want to make it look like suicide or something like that happen. You would think like this is
Epstein.
One of the big, exactly. But you gotta think like this is a huge terrorist guy. He's obviously got a reputation. Do you really want to go into a prison with that kind of reputation following you without anyone in on it?
Call it a plot hole if you want.
I don't want to call it a plot hole.
No, yeah, I don't either. Because it pays off within the movie, and
right.
It's not like it's completely ignored, but like you can kind of just tell where the story's going a little bit.
Right.
But he's in prison. He immediately gets in a prison fight, and this is a neat. Well, I guess
great
first
scene.
off, the prison is a sci-fi prison.
It is.
The floors. This is the only other sci-fi element of the film. The floors are magnetized, and all the prisoners have to wear these big old boots, which If anything ever happens, they can just lock the prisoners in place, which is pretty neat. And I do like the acting, even by all the extras, how they're like walking around as if they're kind of sticking to the floor. It's pretty good, but
and it's like, I guess that could happen. You know, like that's within the realm of possibility.
But he immediately gets in a big prison fight, and this is a neat scene because we see Sean Archer, again, ultimate Boy Scout, basically having to become Castor Troy in this scene. Right. And Cage plays it perfectly as this guy that's kind of timid, a little unsure of himself, but then realizes he has to kind of force himself to get crazy. He has to force himself to go full Nick Cage. And he does, and he almost kills a guy.
I think it's really great when he's like crying, but then also yelling like "woo!" like while he's crying.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. After that whole ordeal is sorted, then he speaks with Pollux Troy. Like he like tests him. He asks him a question, and that was a little weird to me. It's like, is Pollux Troy aware that they can do this kind of surgery?
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I was like, why is he skeptical? Like if you look at him, there's, like I said, absolutely zero indication that anything happened at all. Like there's no, you know.
They do mention that the only thing that's different is the blood types, but that's, you know, obviously Pollux Troy's not going to know that.
Right.
But that's good because that pays off later, too, the blood types do.
Exactly.
So.
But yes, I did think it was weird that he questioned him like
that. Yeah, he was asking him about, like, what medication do I take or something. But, again, Sean Archer, knowing Castor Troy and the Troys as well as he does, knows. But then he talks to him, he's like, oh, my memory's all fuzzy. It's just, you know, it's implying that he'd been beaten to shit and stuff. And he's like, I can't remember, where's the bomb or something? Like, he doesn't come out quite that straight. But he learns that the bomb is at the Los Angeles Convention Center.
Right.
Meanwhile, Nicolas Cage, Castor Troy without a face, has woken up from his coma. He immediately gets his gang to kidnap the doctor, come over, perform the same procedure, giving him John Travolta's face, and then he torches the evidence. He burns the entire clinic down with, again, the 3, 4, 5 people in there that know.
Clearly, like, this movie was built on just the idea of what if these two people switched faces and bodies. It's funny to see it, like, happen. Like, because they really do.
Yeah, you have to make that literal at a certain point, right? Right. Yeah, it's a great concept. This is a high concept film,
and it's because it's already so ridiculous when John Travolta does it, and then it's even more ridiculous when Nick Cage with no face kidnaps the doctor and makes him do it to him.
Yeah. So from now on, when I say Troy, it's going to be John Travolta. Just to clarify for all you listeners at home who might be confused. Archer, at prison, is told that he has a visitor. And, of course, it is John Travolta.
It's immediate. It's literally, like, we see the thing happening, too. Like, we see the doctor come in and start to do the surgery, and then the scene ends, and the very next
5 seconds later.
Yes, like it's him showing
Well,
up.
Actually, at that point, we haven't even seen that the place has been torched down because I think
we didn't see that even.
Yeah, he brings the newspaper and he's like, "Don't you read the paper?" And it says like the institute burned down, 4 dead or whatever. This scene is incredible. This is the first time the two of them are acting as each other. We get to see Travolta really unleashed here, doing a full Nick Cage. It's not as good as Nick Cage doing a full Nick Cage, but it's very fun in its own right. And I found it funny in a way that, I mean, we said earlier, Nick Cage being Nick Cage is funny. This is funny in a different way. It's just like a different kind of, it doesn't quite have the same feel as Nick Cage, but it's still fun. Like when he does the woo, you good looking. Like it's just really funny.
It's just good watching him like try to channel Nick Cage, and like even subtly, like when he talks just in a lower voice, he gives the little like twang that Nick Cage does.
Yeah,
and I like that about. I think he definitely went out of his way to try to channel Nick Cage, and I think that's just fun.
You good looking. You're hot. It's like looking in a mirror, only not.
I didn't want to bring this up, but I'm just thinking about it now. What happened to John Travolta's face? doubled in width, but it didn't get fatter. It's like the bones just got bigger.
Like recently?
Compared to like Saturday Night Fever.
Yeah, I don't know. You mean like by this point in his career, or
yeah,
by like,
his face
like
just
now?
like stretched, but it's not. I mean, I'm sure he put on weight, but it's not like his face doesn't look fat. It's just like bony. It's just he's got like just a huge jaw all of a sudden in the mid-90s.
It's like,
I don't know what it is.
It's definitely like he has a caricature-esque face.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. I don't know if maybe he had some like weird surgery.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it is. And I mean, we all know his hairline is completely different every time you see him. The man is not.
He's full-blown bald now.
Well, he is until next Academy Award was when he embarrassed himself again. But like, no, his like there used to be a thing where he was almost fully bald, and then he's at the Oscars. I think it was the year that he first he did the Adele Dazeem thing.
Right.
Then the next year he was back at the Oscars to kind of apologize, and then he made it worse by touching her face all over.
Yeah.
And his hairline was like significantly lower. Like he had more hair than he had before, and it's like, okay, someone got some hair transplants or something. But
I think he made the right decision by going bald. I hope he sticks with it. He just looks more like normal. He's looked weird for the past like 20 years with every single hair change, you know?
Yeah.
I think the bald works at least 1% better than all these other hairstyles he keeps trying to go with.
This is not the golden age of Travolta.
Right.
But this is a very strong silver age. Golden age Travolta, you got Saturday Night Fever, you got Grease, you got Urban Cowboy, like all within 3 or 4 years. Huge movies.
Right.
Then he disappears. Then Pulp Fiction is kind of the resurrection.
Yeah.
He's in that post-Pulp Fiction glow, which, you know, he was starting to make some crap here too, because he's got Michael and Phenomenon. But this is also Get Shorty. You know, there was still... You know, I mean, it's before Swordfish.
I think one of his big, like, post-Pulp Fiction movies before Face Off was another John Woo movie, Broken Arrow.
Oh, I've heard of that one. Okay.
It was him and Christian Slater, I think. I haven't seen it, but I'm aware of it.
Christian Slater's another guy whose face just got wider, even though it didn't get fatter.
That's also true.
He has a very Travolta-like bone structure.
He does. So it's good that they paired up for that movie then.
You know, we were making fun of John Travolta here, of course, because it's easy to, but this is when he goes full Cage. All of Cage's personality traits, you know, Castor Troy's personality traits, the sexual deviancy is there.
Right.
Not that Cage isn't a weirdo, but I think that's historically probably more true of Travolta, given what we know about him.
That's definitely.
And then, you know, the nepotism, which is wonderful, and that's also probably... Not that that's not true for Cage, but it's probably very true for Travolta. So it's weird that the more he plays Nicolas Cage, the more he plays himself too.
I know, right? Yeah, I think this whole sequence, whenever he like goes to Archer's, I guess his like neighborhood and his house, and like he's like acclimating to his life.
He overshoots his house at first, and
and
his wife's just staring at him, or
that
not
whole
his
part's
wife,
great.
Archer's wife.
I love that part.
And of course, at this point, he gets his brother out of prison. He struck a deal, and he's going to cooperate, which of course Pollux doesn't want to do until Archer explains what's up. At this point, Archer wants to, or not. I keep saying Archer. Damn it! At this point, Castor Troy, in the body of Archer, wants to actually stop the bomb from going off. And you're like, oh, what's this about? And it's really, he just wants to play the hero. Now that he has the opportunity to change his life, he wants to go ahead and take that. And he's like, hey, no one's going to stop me. So that's kind of an interesting little monkey wrench into the story.
Yeah, that was weird. I was kind of thinking about that when I was watching it this time. It's like, I get what the reasoning is, because, you know, if he's a hero, he'll make a bunch of money. But I did think it was interesting that he was so, like, willing to just give up a life of crime, which seemed like all he was interested in before.
I'm speculating here, but I also think he's not necessarily giving up the life of crime. He's just practicing it in a more safe environment, for lack of a better term, where he can protect himself easier. But he stops the bomb.
Yeah.
Very casually, of course.
He does a little dance.
And this is, I think, the best Travolta stuff here. And I love when the president calls him. He's like, put the president on hold. Like, he's just he's just reveling. He's truly basking in his phony heroism. And it's such a perfect contrast to Travolta earlier, when his his colleagues are treating him as a hero, and he's like, no, we're not opening the champagne, you know.
Right.
And no, this guy's just like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'm a hero. And it's wonderful. And it's, oh man. And then, of course, things are changing at home. He reads Eve's diary, which mentions that they were trying to have sex and they couldn't. And he's got like a funny reaction. He's like, reads that and goes like,
loser. He just like reads this as like, huh, loser.
Yeah, Travolta's hilarious in this movie. I do think Cage is the better performance, but Travolta playing Cage is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So he's doing candlelight dinners with Eve, and they have sex at one point. He seems to be turning things around for Archer's family. Of course, Archer isn't obviously there. He also has this thing with Archer's daughter, his teenage daughter named Jamie. Yeah. This is incredibly uncomfortable.
That first scene where he discovers his daughter is very uncomfortable.
Where she's in her underwear. Yeah, because you can see it in his eyes, exactly what he's doing. And of course,
you see with the camera too. They do.
Well, yeah. Oh, and God, that's something. I don't want to call out John Woo. John Woo's a wonderful man, for all I know. But this actress, Dominique Swain, born in 1980. This movie comes out in 1997, so 16 or 17 when it's shot.
And there's a butt shot.
Yeah, I mean, there's no nudity, but, she's objectified by the camera.
Right.
Objectified for the purpose of establishing, or
that someone's being
not
creepy.
Establishing, for continuing Castor's character.
Right.
But also, same year, she's in a Lolita movie. This poor girl.
Yeah.
Dominique Swain. Is she just 1997's version of 1976 Jodie Foster?
I think so.
Unfortunately, Taxi Driver, the girl who lived down the lane, very sexually charged characters in those two movies. So yeah, just unfortunate.
Yeah, unfortunate. I would agree.
And especially because he goes up to her when, like, right after this is earlier when he kind of strikes out with Eve, and he even says something. I can't remember the line exactly, but he just like sees her and he's just like, "Ooh, things are."
He says that the plot thickens, is what he says.
It's just, this would be so much more comfortable if she were 19.
Right.
I mean, it would still be uncomfortable in the context of the story, but now it's like uncomfortable in the context of just the filmmaking too.
Yes.
And I just hate this stuff.
It's definitely like a little too far.
It's mostly just this one scene, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's pretty much just this one scene. Like, there's another scene, but it's not like really objectifying.
Oh yeah,
her.
she's almost raped by her boyfriend, but that's not
she's by a actual rapist.
Oh God, no!
Yeah.
What?
Dude, that's Danny Masterson from That 70s Show.
Oh, I knew the name. I didn't know he's in That 70s Show. I didn't know he's. Oh wait, is it the long haired dude?
Yes, like curly haired guy. Yeah, he had like a long history of that. Like all the way back,
and charged with 3 counts of forcible rape. Wow.
Yeah, but there's been like accusations from like this far back, because he was a Scientologist, and it like got suppressed.
Does that explain John Travolta's sexual deviancies? We're talking about it. Is John Travolta's eyeing up a 16-year-old's ass? I mean,
maybe. I don't know.
Oh, I hate this conversation. Can we move on to the Blair Witch Project?
Like, that's the thing. Like, it just, I don't know. It doesn't get better, I guess. Like, but yeah. So that's Danny Masterson, who is an actual.
Yeah. See, I recognize that name, Danny Masterson, but I didn't even know which character he was in the movie.
Yeah, that was like the only thing I could think when I was watching this scene. Because it's just like, I don't know.
It's nice you see him kind of get the shit kicked out of him, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I like the scene for that reason, but it's like, when it's starting and that's all happening, I'm just like, oh no. Of course it had to be this guy.
Well, and of course, after that scene, after Castor Troy as John Travolta kind of beats this guy up, threatens him, he takes his not real daughter back in and he talks to her. He gives her a cigarette because that's their initial scene. He finds her smoking and then he joins her and she's like, "When did you smoke?" But he's, of course, Castor Troy. He gives her a switchblade, which is surprising. She's like, "Oh," and he's like, "Listen, next time a guy messes with you, he tells her what to do. He says, like, I think stab his cock, or I think, like, around the groin region.
No, he's like,
and then
says,
twist
like,
so the wound won't close.
Exactly. He said thigh.
Well, that's groin adjacent.
It's because he also said, like, make sure he pulls down his pants or something like that.
Back in prison, Nicolas Cage, Sean Archer, the good guy, knows he needs to escape. Talks to Tom Jane, who's in prison. This is kind of a weird role for Thomas Jane. Like, I thought he would have been kind of an established actor at this point, and this is like a really small role for him. But,
I was thinking the same thing.
It's always great to see Thomas Jane, of course.
Of course.
But, okay, so this next scene, he learns from Thomas Jane that the only place anyone gets their boots off is when they go to get shock treatment. So he beats up a guard to steal a cigarette and then goes to get willingly kind of goes, well, he's carried, but he wants to go get his shock treatment. Chris Bauer's character is already there, who's got his brain, like, partially fried. And the attending doctor is played by one John Bloom, a.k.a. Joe Bob Briggs.
Wait. Did I miss that? I thought you were going to say John Carroll Lynch. Because he was...
No, John Carroll Lynch is like the main guard.
Yeah, he's like the main guard. But yeah, I didn't notice that. I'm going to have to rewatch that scene.
You and I, we like weird, stupid B horror movies, right?
Yes.
If there's one person that loves that stuff more than you or I, it's Joe Bob Briggs, a.k.a. John Bloom, his real name. A lover of all things schlock, eminent TV host who was on TV in the 90s at this time on TNT. This is his we talked about how hot Nicolas Cage was. Really, Joe Bob was the real show. But what a fucking waste.
I didn't even notice him, so
it's like a cameo. I guess I question if it's even supposed to be a cameo because he was just an actor. It's cut, but he's supposed to do a cameo in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. That scene's cut, but that was explicitly a cameo. I guess Casino he plays a character. That's not really a cameo. He plays the Texan guy who Robert De Niro fires in Casino. That's the only time I've really seen him act other than this. But if it's a cameo, it's a failure.
I can't believe... I mean, I straight up didn't notice it. I've watched this movie multiple times.
It actually reminds me of, another mid-90s sci-fi action movie that completely wastes a wonderful genre icon as a doctor who has, like, one line. Escape from L.A. and Bruce Campbell, right?
Yes.
It's the same kind of thing, really.
Did you ever see Intruder?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess that is post-Evil Dead, but I have a feeling that was
Dead
probably
2 as well, right? But yeah, it's just him as a cop in like one
scene.
At
the very end. 5 seconds of screen time or whatever.
But it also, like, every DVD copy of Intruder puts his name at the top.
Oh, of course. And Sam Raimi, which is funny because Sam Raimi isn't an actor. He just acts in that movie and gets killed. But it's like, Sam Raimi is like, oh, Sam Raimi directed it? No, he just gets killed. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the escape happens. There's lots of throwing tables around. There's shooting.
It's a huge scene.
It's a big scene. It's Nick Cage and Chris Bauer fighting all these people. Chris Bauer starts killing people, of course, because he's just a criminal who, at this point, like I said, brain kind of fried. But Cage does try to get him to stop killing people. But Cage also full-on kills people, too. Like, when he throws that big thing of acid and shoots it, like, that probably killed those guys, right?
Yeah. I feel like he was kind of, seeing the guards there, he was kind of feeling justified in it. Because I think he found it to be cruel and unusual.
He does have a line to John Carroll Lynch when John Carroll Lynch beats him or something. He's like, when I got out of here, your ass is getting locked up or something. And he's speaking as an FBI agent, of course. But the guards are a little overzealous.
Yeah, to say the least. It is
not
like a
as much as they
security.
Could
be. Yeah, I mean these are probably like some of the worst criminals.
The movie could have done something more with those guys. I mean, I don't think they didn't end up doing that because there's just no time.
Right.
It's a 2-hour, 20-minute movie. A lot of stuff happens. We can't get into that.
I know, this movie never stops.
Because even the quote-unquote normal scenes, when it's just family drama at home, it's not normal family drama. It's a bad guy in disguise trying to fuck the good guy's wife or daughter. Like, that's not. The movie never really slows down. Even when it's not an action scene, something weird is happening. But this, of course, prison scene. it leads to a huge riot. Thomas Jane saves Archer's life by taking out John Carroll Lynch, and Archer gets to the roof of the prison, which is when I learned that the prison was on the water. Did we see that earlier?
No, I think it was supposed to be a reveal.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was just... Because,
I know when he walks out, he's, shocked. Yeah, it looks like they're on an oil rig.
There's a helicopter that shows up, starts shooting at him, and then he jumps, and it's, about 100 feet or something, 75 feet. It's into the water. Incredible stunt. John Travolta is just leaving for work, and then Archer's wife is like, hey, were you just trying to avoid today? What are you doing? And he's like, what's going on? And then so they go, it's the son's birthday, so they go to visit the grave. This guy that killed this poor kid has to go to sit at the grave while the wife prays, the mother. And then he gets to work, and he mentions that it's his son's birthday. And they're like, well, this ought to be poetic justice,
Right.
Castor Troy is dead. And then he's like, where's the body? And they're like, oh, they haven't found the body yet. And he's like, and then he flips out. And so he knows Castor Troy's not Castor, in this case, Archer isn't dead.
Right.
And the guy's like, well, I assure you, he's not coming back to L.A. if he's got any brains on him. And he's like, I assure you, he's already here. Or
yeah,
something.
That's a great line.
And of course, we don't really find out how he gets back to L.A., but he's back there. He gets a car at one point. I don't know how. And he makes a phone call. Well, he makes 2 phone calls first. And this is, again, Nicolas Cage. Calls his wife, who works at a hospital. She's a doctor. And says, the man who you think is your husband isn't your husband. Get out of the house immediately. And she hangs up, thinking it's a weirdo.
Right.
Then he makes a call to the FBI, speaks with, of course, himself, Castor Troy in this case. Castor Troy picks up the phone and is like, okay, this is Sean Archer speaking. And then he's like, well, I guess that makes me Castor fucking Troy or something.
Yeah,
like,
that's pretty much exactly
awesome.
what it is. Yeah, that's exactly
and
what
that's like all that scene is he just kind of, the conversation doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah,
more
just
or less
an acknowledgement.
after that. Sean Archer ends up going to the home of Dietrich, Castor Troy's drug dealer buddy, played by Nick Cassavetes.
Right.
And his sister, Sasha, played by the incredible Gina Gershon, star of Bound and Showgirls, and one episode of Psych.
To the American duos, yep, she sure is. Her and Tim Curry.
Sasha has a young boy, and she understands that if she's ever caught doing anything criminal again, anything Castor Troy related, they're going to take her boy away.
Yeah.
Sean Archer discovers that the little boy is actually Castor Troy's son, which is something Castor Troy doesn't even know. And he suddenly feels, he feels bad for the kid. He feels bad for Sasha, too. He kind of wants to help them, protect them. And, of course, they are scouted out by Pollux Troy and the FBI, who begin this giant shootout. Fantastic scene. First of all, this home. This penthouse apartment, amazing, amazing
crazy.
Set for this kind of action scene. Lots of glass to be broken. They do a thing which this felt very John Woo. They put headphones over the little boy's ears, and we can tell that it's Somewhere Over the Rainbow, the Wizard of Oz song. Yeah. And I thought, this is going to be a neat thing where the scene's going to be slow motion and it's going to be set to this song.
That's what I thought, too.
It wasn't for a while. It eventually gets that way. I'm not sure if it's ever slow motion, but eventually that becomes dominant in the soundtrack. But that's a couple minutes into the scene still. And this is after, dozens of people have been shot. It's an incredible action scene. But I'm like, this feels very, very John Woo. This feels very Asian cinema, Asian action cinema. I actually read it was so much John Woo that he actually paid his own money to license the song. The studio didn't want to license the song, and he's like, fuck it, I'll do it myself. And he puts it in the movie, and then the movie made a lot of money, so the studio paid him back. It's like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, we didn't even mention that before this whole shootout scene is when we get the classic scene with Nick
the
Cage,
face-off line, the title line,
says he's gonna take his face off.
I'd like to take his face off.
I never knew it was a weird line delivery because he's on drugs.
And then right after we get a scene that's just as great before Gina Gershon is reintroduced, where he's just looking in the mirror and exploring his face. At first he points a gun at the mirror, and then that's one of the great Nick Cage face scenes of just him smiling like a lunatic and just twitching his face, and then he slowly turns around.
So during this action scene, Dietrich gets killed. Dietrich then kisses his sister on the mouth, which is weird. Then he dies. Gina Gershon and her young son get away. Then we have the famous mirror, the House of Mirrors scene, which if
Incredible.
This movie is known for one scene, it's probably this, right? This is a big John Woo thing too, but how he blocks this scene where there's all these mirrors, they shoot most of them, but there's one mirror left, and it's each of the two characters. They know each other's on the other end. They both have their backs to it, and so it's this beautiful, it's obvious composition, but it's interesting composition.
Yeah,
at least the whole mirror thing. And you obviously mentioned the mirror in the previous Nick Cage face acting scene.
And then we get one of my favorite lines from the movie.
And what is that?
Well, so it's when they're talking back and forth, and he's like, "Look, as much as I'm enjoying being you, we both know that it's better being, ourselves." So he's like, "Why don't we just switch back?" And then, he tells him to fuck off or whatever. He goes, "Okay, well, I guess we'll just have to kill each other."
Yeah. And then so they both shoot the mirror.
Right.
And both are able to get away.
Yeah.
This is just a thing in these kind of gun fu movies where probably this movie more than most, but guns are awesome, but when it comes to main characters, they kind of function like fists.
Yes.
Where because a gun in real life can kill you in a split second, but not in these movies. Not when it comes to a main character, anyways.
Right. It's especially prevalent in the prison break scene, and then later on, which I'll talk about.
Even earlier, the airport hangar.
I mean, it's the whole time, but anytime where they're just outrunning bullets, it happens a lot in this movie. And there's 20 people shooting with ARGs, and somehow this unarmed person's completely evading it.
Yeah. So Nick Cage gets up to the roof. He swings around and kicks Pollux Troy down through the glass roof and kills Liam Gallagher once and for all. And there's a wonderful moment where John Travolta is looking at him and is all sad, and then another FBI or a SWAT team guy is just like, "Why are you so sad, sir? It's just Pollux Troy." And then he just shoots him in the head. It's wonderful. So now, this is the vendetta that I mentioned earlier. It takes a while for it to be personal for Castor Troy, but it is now. I mean, it's always been personal for Archer.
Right.
There's now a 24-hour guard on the Archer house, but Archer is still able to sneak in there.
Yeah.
He finds Eve. He has to work really hard to get her to not scream and to get her to kind of trust him, and she still really doesn't, but he does his best to say, "Hey, this is I am me. And that dude, the guy you're sleeping with, is not me." And he mentions the blood types, right. but he also gets sentimental over the photo of his son, of course, and he takes it, puts it in his pocket. So then at night, she gives John Travolta a little prick, takes the blood into the hospital, finds that it is indeed not her husband's blood type.
Do you remember their blood types?
I know. This is another IMDb thing. This is a symbolic thing.
Really?
Whichever one is which. Which is the universal donor?
O negative.
So that is Archer. Archer's O negative because he is the good guy. He's the giver.
Right.
And then the universal receiver, it must be AB positive?
Yeah.
Universal receiver, that is Castor Troy, the one who just takes. And it's okay, that was... Again, obviously, I combed through the IMDb trivia for this movie. I don't normally do that.
Right.
This is one of the rare, interesting points that the film had.
Yeah, no, that's...
the trivia had.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
She still doesn't fully trust him, but she's obviously more open to trusting him than she was before, talking about Nicolas Cage as Archer here. Then Troy gets to the hospital, he just flat out brings his goons with him, which I think is really weird at a certain, because he is full on, he's cosplaying FBI now, but he's still working with those goons, those guys that helped kill the doctor and stuff. It's like, aren't these guys probably wanted for something? Like maybe find some new friends. But he gets to the hospital, he thinks he's stumbling upon Eve with Archer, but she's just like, hey, what are you doing? Like, I'm a doctor, I'm on call, like, that's why I'm here. And then as that scene's wrapping up, he says something like, oh, all this lies and deceit, this is beginning to feel like a real marriage, which is kind of a cute line.
Right.
Castor Troy kills Archer's boss at one point.
Right.
That's an odd scene, even for this movie.
Yeah,
he notices that he's got like a heart issue, and then he just like karate chops
him in the neck.
And then just says like, oh, it looks like he had a heart attack. And just like no questions asked. I guess.
Exactly. That never gets brought up again.
They're having a funeral for this FBI. I guess he's not the full-on director, but he must be the director of the LA office or something.
Right.
Of course, Castor Troy, Archer, has been promoted. Eve tells Nick Cage about the funeral. He says, like, this is the only time I can get to John Travolta. Get our daughter out of there and get yourself out of there, and then I will show up and I will kill him or whatever. And she's like, I can get Jamie out of here, but I'll have to go. It'll look weird if I don't. So the funeral at a beautiful beachfront church.
Interesting setting.
This is perhaps the most John Woo scene of the film, because this is where we finally get the doves. You know, we've been waiting for it.
Yeah.
Well, first off, the real Archer has some final words with Sasha. And he's like, you stay out of this, you make sure our son is safe. It's not actually his son, of course, but...
Yeah.
And she really wants Archer dead, the real... Or the... Not... Well, she wants the real Archer dead, but she thinks it's Troy.
Right.
So this is where it gets confusing, but that's also important when it comes back later. But Archer shows up at the funeral. He enters with the doves. He kneels down and prays.
Very Hitman. In Hitman, there's a big finale at a church. It has that vibe to it. It's very like It was like a beachside church.
Oh, it's straight up plagiarism.
Yeah, it might as well be.
Eventually, the church empties out after the funeral, and it's just Nick Cage. But then, of course, Travolta shows up with Eve. He and his men are holding Eve hostage.
Right.
And he claims that Jamie is on her way too. So we get ourselves a wonderful standoff that becomes a Mexican standoff when some of the goons get involved. Then it becomes a Colombian standoff. I don't know the proper term when Sasha shows up.
Yeah, is there even a term for that?
You felt like we needed this because there's this whole like mistaken identity thing throughout the movie. Like we needed a scene where people are aiming guns at the wrong people, and
it's a great scene for Travolta because he does that whole like ooh hoo hoo what a predicament. Like he goes like evil villain in this scene, and he does the whole thing where he does like the Jesus on the cross pose.
Yes, he does. Travolta, you just really get the sense he is absolutely having a blast in this movie.
Yeah.
Whenever he gets to, which is Nicolas Cage in the beginning of the movie when he's just doing that, when he's grinding on that choir singer and everything. I mean, same kind of thing, but yeah. But Sasha, of course, shows up, guns pointed at Travolta, but of course thinking she's killing or about to kill Archer. The shooting commences. Sasha ends up diving and saving Eve, but she gets shot herself, and she dies on top of Archer, who, of course, she thinks is Troy, and she says to him, like, make sure our son is okay.
Yeah.
Then the fight continues, and the fight, again, this is one of those things, they have guns, right? But no, it's a big action scene, it's the climax. It's not going to be over in one shot, right? So and then of course Jamie gets involved, and Nick Cage sees her and tries to save her, but she thinks she's trying to run from him, and she's falling downstairs. People, there's bullets going everywhere. Eventually, Nicolas Cage, the hero, Sean Archer, overpowers Travolta, but then Jamie screws everything up, grabs a gun, and shoots. And you don't blame her here, but she shoots her dad in the shoulder, thinking, of course, he is her brother's murderer. And then immediately after that, then Travolta just grabs her and is like, well, it's like, thanks, but you kind of screwed up or whatever. But then, of course, it was set up. The Switchblade. She pulls it out of her pocket, stabs him in the thigh, and yes, we do get confirmation there is a twist, although no groin is removed.
Yeah.
A lot of great little setups and payoffs here in
That's
this
true.
movie, but then it becomes a boat chase. And I had seen this movie before, it had been a long time. I was full on ready. I was thinking in my mind as I was watching this movie, no boat chase will ever be a satisfying climax. I was thinking that. Let me explain my mindset here. A boat chase to me is a supplemental action scene. It is a first or second act thing.
It's not like a final act thing.
Well, yes. Well, listen, this is while I'm watching the movie.
Okay.
Think of boat chase action movie scenes. Last Crusade.
Last Crusade came to mind immediately.
First act.
Yeah. Yes.
First act, right? It's a great scene, but that's not the climax.
No.
What's that Joe Don Baker movie that was on Mystery Science Theater? Not Mitchell, it's the other one, because the climactic boat chase, and it's like the lamest thing in the world there. And I'm like, I understand, we don't have to measure these movies against Mystery Science Theater movies. I get it, but From Russia with Love, the climax is kind of a boat chase.
Yeah.
But the real awesome scene in that is the fight on the train.
Right.
Like, everything after that is like, it's a slightly underwhelming dessert to a fantastic steak you just had with Robert Shaw on the train.
That's right.
Thunderball, a little bit, kind of a little bit of a boat chase aspect to that climax, which really not great because it's like they all do the sped up thing, and it just really and then
it's different.
And then you could also argue same kind of thing with From Russia with Love. The real climax is the 45-minute underwater harpoon fight,
That's
which
true.
I personally find incredibly underwhelming, but
it's cool
for different reasons, So I'm thinking like, okay, when has there been a great boat chase climax? Then it becomes clear that, in Face Off, as this scene goes on, it gets more and more incredible. At first, it's just like boat chase. It's like, okay, yeah, boat chase. Then a police boat shows up. They're shooting back at these guys. Nick Cage's boat gets rammed through a boat, which explodes, and then there's like an oil leak on his, or a gasoline leak on his boat, so he has to jump to the other boat. And then they're fighting on there, which is awesome. Travolta picks up the anchor and is swinging it at him, and it's like, oh my god, this is awesome. And then, of course, the on-water version of Indiana Jones climbing underneath the truck in Raiders of the Lost Ark, as John Travolta is thrown off the boat, but he grabs onto the anchor and is basically water skiing on his shoes until he's able to climb back on. Incredible stunt.
That was great.
This was a wonderful climactic boat chase that I didn't think was possible.
I also just think, like, right out the gate, I love it because at this point, there's so many times when it feels like we were coming to, like, a huge action closer. Like,
sure.
Like
going back to the mirror scene.
Like, that scene was like,
that
this
could
this
have been
could
the
be
climax.
The ending. And then the church, that definitely could have been the ending. So by the time they're on the boats, I'm just like, oh, this is incredible. It just won't stop. Like, they just keep it coming.
Part of what I love about this movie, and maybe, personally I don't love the Fast and the Furious movies, but I think this could be the appeal for some people that do love those, the maximalism of it.
Definitely.
Nothing is subtle.
No.
Even some of the composition that I'm talking about, like, they're in between a mirror, that's not subtle. It's just mildly clever, and it's interesting visually, and it's interesting. It works thematically, but it's not subtle by any means. And like anything with the mirrors are like the least subtle things in film, basically.
Right.
But oh man, this is awesome. And then this climax basically kind of has a 3-act structure, going back to the church. That's the first act.
Right.
Boat chase, second act, because the boat crashes. They get sent flying. Onto the beach, and then that's really the third act, I guess, of that scene where they're fighting on the beach.
They set up a harpoon while they're on the boat chase. I believe it was Nick Cage, who is Archer, he found a harpoon like in the back of John Travolta's boat, like when he jumped onto it the first time. And so so it was established, but it wasn't like
Because of course Archer, Nicolas Cage, picks up the harpoon, pulls the trigger with Travolta pinned to the dock or the wall or whatever.
Yeah.
But Travolta is able to grab it and kind of keep it from firing for enough to kind of taunt him and say some more things.
Yeah.
Before finally giving in and getting killed by the harpoon.
Well, he gets killed, so we think.
Well, yeah, Face Off 2, who knows?
So we maybe think.
The FBI and the police show up, and, you just see Archer, Nicolas Cage, is just looking up, and he's just thinking, like, oh, shit, how am I getting out of this? But then they're like, are you okay, Archer? And
Yeah.
like, he's like, what did you call me? And of course, when the big fight was happening in the church, once Jamie was involved, that was when Eve was on the phone with the FBI.
Right.
And thankfully, that you'd think that would take a little longer. Than
Yeah,
a
that's
couple minutes
what
on the phone,
I
but
was
it works.
thinking.
Maybe they did find that fail-safe plan that they had. They needed a reminder of where the documentation was that they switched faces or something.
Perhaps.
So the day is saved. The two are placed in the back of the same ambulance.
Yeah.
Nick Cage takes his ring back, and then they find a way. I think they get like the White House doctor or something. They say something like the best doctor from DC is gonna.
That's exactly what they say.
They're going to redo the face thing, and then John Travolta, as the good guy, Sean Archer, shows up to stay with his family, and he has brought Gina Gershon's son.
Right.
Which is a little bit of a weird ending. I understand they had to do something with the kid, but it's kind of weird. You just think of it like from the family's perspective.
It's another like too perfect. Like, I don't know.
It's not just that, but it's also like, oh, we've got our father back. Oh, and we have this other kid.
Yeah, you got a new kid now. Yeah, I think what's weird about it too is that it implies that he just adopted this kid without consulting his wife.
Well, yeah, I wasn't even thinking that, but yes, yeah, obviously, yes. And that's another thing, like, again, not subtle. But
right.
He sees in this kid his own son, right?
Even though it's the son of his greatest enemy.
Right. It's not subtle, but it works as like emotional storytelling.
Yeah.
Right. There is an emotional core to this film, which is probably something that might be lacking in the Fast and the Furious movies. I don't really know. Again, I don't want to.
I mean, there's definitely no subtlety in the Fast and
Well,
Furious.
yeah, and I know it's always family,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if that's as hollow as it sounds when I hear people memeing about it.
I mean, it is.
Okay,
but I do think like
this movie's about family.
Yeah, I think like the better Fast and Furious movies are a very similar vibe to this movie without the like futurism of it. Well, but some of them do have that though, so maybe I shouldn't even say that.
Okay, so I remembered, but before we get to your thoughts on Face Off, Feck, let me revisit the Liam Gallagher situation.
Okay.
As the main credits roll, we get a song by the Australian band In Excess. Mm-hmm. The song is Don't Lose Your Head. It's on the album Elegantly Wasted, which apparently is the last album that they did. It was the album that I guess they were touring for when Michael Hutchence died.
Right.
I knew Michael Hutchence died relatively young because I remember as a kid there was like an MTV or maybe VH1 reality show about picking the next lead singer for In Excess or something. This is like 2005 maybe. But yeah, Michael Hutchence, fantastic, I would say underrated frontman in rock. Incredible singer.
Certainly.
Good songwriter. Even though he's dead, he has a songwriting credit on one of Dua Lipa's hits, because if you listen to that song, it's absolutely just, I think it's What You Need by In Excess. It's absolutely just an In Excess riff. And I like Dua Lipa, so no, I'm not throwing shade there, but
that's cool.
I didn't really know 90s In Excess. This song I liked quite a bit. And it did sound a little Oasis-y to me.
Okay.
Again, going back to Liam Gallagher. According to Wikipedia, according to an interview I'm reading this exactly, according to an interview in the News of the World Sunday magazine, the lyrics for Don't Lose Your Head were aimed squarely at Oasis frontman Liam Gallagher, with whom Hutchence had many disagreements over the years. Which is news to me. I looked all over, this is just Wikipedia, but I looked all over Wikipedia, pages for both Hutchence and for Liam Gallagher. There's no mention of the other one in either.
So there you go. So, there's the tie-in.
So this may be a great, forgotten, secretive rock feud or something. But
you should throw that on the IMDb trivia.
But yeah, Liam Gallagher, not only does he appear in the film, he is referenced in the song lyrics of Don't Lose Your Head, the song that closes out Face Off. And on that bombshell, Feck, What did you think of Face Off?
It's great. I mean, it's one of the most, I think there's a lot of movies where you're supposed to suspend disbelief, but it's one of those movies where it's like, it doesn't work if you don't suspend every shred of disbelief that you could possibly have. Not a single moment of it makes any coherent sense, but that's what makes it work. And of course, I mean, it's just fun to see Nick Cage and John Travolta pretend to be each other for a full movie. Man, it's just crazy.
That is you cannot understate how fun that is.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it all. Really, that's all. Like, it probably wasn't written with them two in mind, but to me, it feels like this movie could have been just like based on that idea of like, what if Nick Cage and John Travolta switch bodies, and that's the movie.
Again, going back to IMDb trivia, there were a ton of names that were at one point or another considered for this movie.
Right.
Arnold and Stallone at one point.
Oh, God.
Michael Douglas, I think he ended up... Michael Douglas was very close to being in this movie. I don't remember who he was going to act opposite, but I think he ended up getting a producer's credit because he, I think, had to regrettably drop out.
Wow.
Because of a timing conflict. I don't know if The Game came out around the same time or something, but he really wanted to be in it, so I think he ended up serving as a producer, is what I read. Alec Baldwin at one point.
God.
Which, Alec Baldwin shooting people with guns, I don't think I can believe it. It
doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound believable.
And Harrison Ford, I think Harrison Ford maybe was going to be opposite Douglas, which would have been interesting.
It's just like, at the end of the day, there's no pairing that could have been better than what they went with.
Denzel and Snipes, I think that would have worked.
That would have been cool.
Probably would have been. Of the pairings that I saw, I think that is my number 2 behind what we have.
That's not that. I would watch that.
But I think Snipes could have nailed the tone.
Yeah, I think they both could have. I think that could have definitely worked.
Oh, yeah, Denzel can overact. I mean, Training, he won an Oscar overacting. Training Day is very much like a Nick Cage type performance, you know?
But I know for a fact, if we get another face-off, it's going to be the same two yet again. Unless they're bringing just Nick Cage back and introducing someone else. I don't know how that would work, but...
This movie's very removed from reality. I understand if you take a relatively straightforward action film and you bring someone back from the dead, it's going to work better in a sequel to this than a sequel to Die Hard or other, action movies.
Yeah.
I get it, because there is that suspend your disbelief. But I just don't want to see that. Yeah, I really don't.
I don't either, but I'm just saying it's happening.
Can you imagine John Travolta headlining a movie nowadays? Jesus.
I mean, that would do it,
sad.
Though. That would do it, though. If it was a sequel to a built-in audience, like, with Face Off.
I don't want to see a sequel, quite frankly.
I don't either, but I'm going to see it if it comes out.
You know what I think? I mean, we're mentioning the actors, of course, here.
Right.
Someone who's hugely a part of how great this movie is John Woo.
Yeah, and
can't overstate early John Woo how different it was from other action filmmakers, American action filmmakers. It was unique. And now, post-Matrix, post-John Wick, post-Wanted, if anyone even remembers that movie, you can't hit us with something that truly feels unique in that way, I don't think.
Yeah.
As far as I know, this is John Woo's best American film. This is an excellent film. I'm not saying it's better than The Killer. I'm not saying it's better than Hard Boiled, but this is an action classic. This is awesome. Beginning to end, it's just incredibly entertaining. The acting is just fun. It's not like great acting. Like, they don't watch scenes from Face Off at Juilliard, I don't think. But it works, and both actors have such strong personalities and all these quirks. And then when you see the other actor playing the other one, then they're really doubling down on the quirks and stuff, and it's fun. It's hard to explain. As we were, I was kind of fumbling with the names and long pauses when I'm thinking of the names, but it's easy to understand when you're watching it because both characters are so distinct. And the action's awesome, and there is enough of a heart to the movie with John Travolta's character and who eventually is Nicolas Cage's character. The attachment to the son and eventually the attachment to Gina Gershon and her son, I think that works well enough for me. I probably wouldn't have wanted more of that than there is, because I think then you run the risk of like that opening scene being like too sappy, too overly sentimental. Because at the end of the day, this is just a turn off your brain and just have a good time kind of movie. But that can be tiring if there isn't at least some kind of human element.
Yeah, I think they balanced it for sure.
Oh yeah, very well done.
Yeah, they balanced it perfectly. Yeah, I agree with I think it's perfect. I mean, I think they did a great job with all of it. I was just like, if you just go into it honestly with no expectations and just wanting to see a movie with Nick Cage and John Travolta, it doesn't get any better than that. I mean, they both bring it.
Would you like to get started on the Blair Witch Project?
I'd love to.
The search of the 3 missing Montgomery College students continues in Frederick County tonight.
10 days and thousands of man-hours have been unable to produce any clues.
We have a few leads, a few other options we want to take advantage of, and just try to put together some pieces to this puzzle.
Do you believe the occult may be involved in the disappearance of your son?
The thing about Blair Witch, though, is that it's kind of hard to take scene-by-scene notes for Blair Witch.
It's a traditional narrative in the sense that there's an A, B, C, but It's not a traditionally told narrative, if that makes sense.
A scene could just be a 5-second shot of Heather about to pee in the middle of the woods, you know, and then they cut to like a close-up of a dead rat, and then, you know, now there's a bunch of rocks, and now it's nighttime, and now, you know.
Before we get into the plot, we need to provide some context. I think we kind of have to talk about what a sensation this was when it came out.
Yeah,
right?
So 1999, this movie, well, first of all, this movie was made in, I think, like 95 or 96. Like, it came out
really
a few years after it was filmed.
It's set in 94, but I'm not saying that's when it was made, because in the context of the movie, it would make sense that it's set a few years before.
There was a lot of hype around this movie initially before they even sold it to any studio. And that's why
this movie essentially invented viral marketing.
It did,
as far as movies go.
It did. I mean, when the movie came out, IMDb listed all the actors as deceased.
Really? Wow. Okay.
All of I say all the actors, the 3 actors.
There's 3 actors. Yeah.
And then those 3, they also like took a year off of like acting to better make it.
So they did the Cannibal Holocaust route, because that was the thing with Cannibal Holocaust. Ruggero Deodato, he had the actors all sign contracts that they had to not make any public appearances for
they
year,
did the
6
same
months
thing.
or something.
They did the same
and
thing,
that hyped up the expectations of, oh my god, is this a snuff film? And I didn't realize.
Right.
I guess I think of Cannibal Holocaust almost as being like a lost film before like the age of DVDs, and now like, okay, people know it, it's like well known, but obviously someone saw it back in the day. So I guess I wouldn't expect Myrick and Sanchez to kind of be borrowing from that as much as they might have. So
I believe Heather Donahue also thought that this might end up being an actual snuff film, and she like brought like a big ass knife on the first day of set, just in case like it didn't go the way she was expecting.
Yeah, you always got to wonder about like a casting call for this, like what that looks like.
And I mean, I gotta say, well, again, I mean, I'll get into this as I go on, but I mean, they couldn't have picked better actors for this movie. I mean, like, this movie really only works if the actors are like 100% believable, and that's in my opinion, like the real strong thing about this movie.
I do not disagree. Were you old enough to remember when this movie came out?
Well, I was born in 1996, so no.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, yeah.
But I can tell you this. I was old enough to remember the Scooby-Doo project, which I don't know if you've ever seen that.
No, of course not, but okay.
But it was...
My dad didn't let me watch cartoons when I was a kid.
They aired... So what they used to do... It's terrifying in retrospect. What they used to do is they would air commercials for a Scooby-Doo marathon, and they would show like real life footage of evidence bags with like famous things from Scooby-Doo, like Velma's glasses or or a bag of Scooby snacks or something.
Or the old school scuba mask or whatever, that thing, yeah.
And then the Scooby-Doo project, it was probably like 20 minutes total, but they aired it in between episodes of Scooby-Doo, like they aired like 5-minute blocks. And it was shot live action, but with the cartoons of the characters like imposed onto like real woods. And it was extremely like lovingly recreated
Interesting.
shots. Like the scene of them walking away from the car, they exact shot with the Mystery Machine.
Okay.
And it's terrifying as a kid, because if you don't know it's a parody, because like obviously you don't know what the Blair Witch Project is when you're that old, that young, I mean, and so it's terrifying.
Well, I'm going to bring up a couple things. First off, I guess I am familiar with one, for lack of a better term, recreation of the Blair Witch Project. No, it's not the Blair Witch Project. I've never seen that, but God bless Jim Wynorski.
I know which one you're talking about, though, I bet.
Well, you missed him in the last movie, but Joe Bob Briggs. I had these downloads on my old computer of old Monster Vision episodes, and he did, I don't remember what they called it, but they did like their own Blair Witch type thing for like
that's
a summer.
not what I was thinking of, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
No, yeah, why would you think of that? But I'm familiar with it. I saw I think Child's Play 2 was one of the movies he did.
Yes.
Maybe the first Child's Play.
I can't remember what that was called.
And then also I want to circle back to my memories of this movie when I was a kid. I did not watch it when I was a kid. I didn't watch it until I was much later. I did not watch horror movies when I was young. I was 15 years old the first time I saw a horror movie in the theater, I think, and it was Disturbia, and it scared the shit out of me. So I've come a long ways. But when I was a kid, I remember hearing about the Blair Witch Project. I remember vaguely, like, there was this, like, is it real kind of thing.
Right.
Now, I was born in 92. I don't think I was in kindergarten when the movie came out, but maybe this is a couple years later. My brother was 3 years older than me, and I used to hang out with him and his friends at recess. And I remember some of them talking about the Blair Witch Project. And so I do remember, like, the Blair Witch being, like, the scariest thing. I mean, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about the mythology. And I didn't see the movie until I was probably an undergrad, so 19 maybe. But, yeah, so I do have kind of these, like, vague recollections of, like, oh, yeah, this was a huge deal when it came out.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't old enough to remember that. But I've definitely looked into it. And also because, like, growing up when I didn't catch, like, all that while it was happening, but I caught just about every parody.
Oh, I saw all
ever.
that when I was a kid.
I'm just saying,
the show? The Nickelodeon show?
Yeah,
all that?
The Nickelodeon show, all that, of course. Yes,
that's Amanda Bynes on there?
But anyhow, I witnessed all of the Blair Witch parodies that ended up shoehorning its way into just about every show, whether it was a kid's show or not. I feel like every Cartoon Network show and every Adult Swim show ended up shoehorning in some Blair Witch parody. So yeah, I mean, it was like its reputation definitely preceded itself. There was I was familiar with it, but honestly, it wasn't even like a positive thing because I felt like people were making fun of it in all these parodies.
Yes, that's the thing that is what surprised me so much when I finally did see this movie in, throwing a year out there, let's say 2013.
Yeah.
At this point, Blair Witch almost seemed like it was a joke. No one was talking about it anymore.
Yeah,
it was like this thing that was big at the time. You know, at this point, this is after some of the Paranormal Activity movies had come out, and like no one was. It wasn't on people's minds. It seemed like one of those movies that had just kind of like lost traction completely.
Yeah, like
and so I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it is.
I can't overstate. I put this on like the first time on a complete whim. Just like thinking, yeah, you know what? I like found footage movies and like, you know, whatever.
Do you? Well, you like the Bad Ben movies, which I do to a certain extent.
I like found footage movies. I mean, it's either like really good or really bad. There's usually no middle ground.
Well, I actually think Bad Ben is the middle ground because there's so many ways in which they're. No, but there's so many ways in which those are terrible. But there's just something fun about Nigel Bach.
Yeah, but like some are just great. Like not fun. You know what I mean? Like it can be really boring. You know, if it's a bad found footage movie, if the actors aren't good and if it's boring, like there's nothing redeeming. About a found
the actors I think are the big thing. Like you mentioned, the acting in this movie is great, and I cannot agree enough. Quite frankly, I mean, horror gets a bad rap, and even though I love the genre, I am guilty of doing this sometimes. Like I've said certain things are good for horror movies, and I've made that, you know, if you call it a mistake, I've made that mistake.
Sure.
The Blair Witch Project, like we don't talk about acting in horror movies. Like really big horror fans might, and I'll say like, oh, this person's really great when they're scared. They have an amazing scream, but it's things like that.
Right.
This movie, the performances in this movie are absolute powerhouses.
I agree.
They're subtle.
Yeah,
it's the opposite of Face
I agree.
Off.
For me, there's not a single like moment that's beyond belief, like in the acting in this whole film. Like they all play it so perfectly.
Yeah, and that's really this is where you have to kind of talk about this movie as a found footage movie, different than when you talk about like a traditional narrative movie, right?
Right.
How this movie works isn't how a movie like The Conjuring works. The Conjuring works because you're into the story, you're into the special effects, what have you.
Right.
Blair Witch Project, if it works or it doesn't work, it's how authentic it is.
Right.
How authentic it feels.
And honestly, I think that's so like at the forefront is the reason why a lot of people don't like it. Not because they have something against like good acting or anything, but because I think many people... If you
can't get into it, you can't get into it.
Like so many people go into this movie thinking, oh, it's a found footage movie like Paranormal Activity. There's going to be a bunch of scary stuff that happens and all this. But this isn't a movie about scary stuff happening. It's like these really great actors responding to a terrifying environment.
That's the thing. Paranormal Activity, a lot of people hate it. At their best, those movies are creepy and they feel authentic enough.
And they're fun.
They're not that fun, but
some of them are fun. Some of them are fun.
Some of them, sure. Paranormal Activity, they are jump scare movies, though. Everything centers around the jump scare. How many jump scares are in this movie? Is there one?
No, there's not one.
Maybe you could argue one of those things that happens at the very end is a jump scare.
Yeah, I was about to say the literal last shot, the literal like last thing that happens, maybe. But
and of course, and that's another thing with found footage movies. They all end exactly the same, basically.
Right.
And that's kind of just unfortunate. That's just the nature of the genre.
We'll talk about this later, but do you know the alternate endings for this movie?
I knew this film had alternate endings. Off the top of my head, I don't know what they are.
Well, basically, just the way that the movie ends, they did, how it ends. They did multiple things that they thought might be very effective and ended up going with the one that they already had in mind.
I think you and I, clearly, we both recommend this film. If you don't know that much about it, definitely check it out. It's probably best to go into it not knowing a whole lot. I do think it's important to understand just how frickin' big this movie was in the context of, I think it's an important film in the history of film for independent filmmakers and stuff like that, but it's also just it's not the first found footage movie, it's one of the biggest Holocaust we already mentioned.
Box office gross, I think ever.
Net gross, yeah. I think it's like this. It's Halloween, I'm sure, is up there. Some other movies that are made for virtually no money. But yeah, absolutely go see it.
So this movie took a while for them to make it. Initially, they kept editing. Because what you have to think, they filmed a lot. And they edited it into an hour 20. Maybe even a little under an hour 20. The initial cut of this movie was an hour 50 or something like that. And they screened it and it was unwatchable. Because it was just so slow and... In this meantime, they had made a documentary about the movie called The Curse of the Blair Witch, which I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I just added it to my Letterboxd watch list just the other day. I had known about it for a while, but also, if I may,
yes,
the Blair Witch Project was the Joe Bob Briggs thing.
I also looked it up a minute ago. I was going to bring it in.
Carrie, Child's Play 2, and Phantasm 1 and 2.
Yeah,
which is noteworthy because on Shudder,
they don't do Phantasm 2.
Joe Bob refused to show Phantasm 2, and he claims that no one could ever watch it because they blow up a Hemi Cuda in it. But anyone who knows, anyone who's seen a DVD set of Phantasm knows the rights with Phantasm 2 are just different than all the other Phantasm movies, so that's obviously the reason they didn't show it. But
I do remember the Blair Witch Project. I think I watched that Child's Play 2 episode recently. But anyhow... they made The Curse of the Blair Witch, which was a straight-to-TV movie that basically acted as a hype for the actual movie. Yeah. And a lot of people probably don't even know that it came out beforehand.
Okay, I'm not sure I knew, but okay. I did know that there was buzz about this movie before, and I thought it was all just because the movie had a website. It had a website, early internet.
Yeah. And the missing flyers, the missing posters.
Oh, sure.
And anyhow... Another thing, we were talking about the actors being that's the forefront of this movie. Another thing that really, really works about this movie that I think a lot of other found footage movies don't do, actually I think probably none, is they wrote this dense mythology around this movie, and never explicitly stated any of it. Just let it
it's not
loom.
in the movie. It's not in the movie,
Right.
but it's out there. You can read
It's
about
there.
it. Yeah.
It's brought up in the movie. Things are brought up,
Yes,
not in
yes.
detail and not like ever fully explored, but it's there, and that's more realistic. It looms, but it's never the forefront of the movie. I think that's
Tolkien-esque.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But the Curse of the Blair Witch like explains all that in detail. So it's like, you know, it feels like a TV documentary, but it's fun, you know, as a little aside.
I appreciate that the movie doesn't really go into detail on the mythology, but at the same time, like, I kind of want to know, and I know
You should watch
some
Curse
of
of
the
Blair
mention,
Witch?
it's hinted at. I should, but I found one of those like wiki pages, and it's and there's all this detail, and I'm like, okay, this isn't mentioned in the movie, and I'm like, is this in one of the sequels? Because there's Book of Shadows, which I know is like this weirdo, like, self-aware sequel. I've never seen it. And then more recently there was like kind of a reboot, and I wasn't sure how much of it comes from that, but maybe it's mostly from the documentary. I don't know.
Yeah, the documentary is just what explains it, but the mythology is what the directors use to sign on the actors. Like,
Sure.
They told them this whole dense, like I mean, Heather said that there were like pages and pages of like this dense mythology that they had made up, and they all thought it was real. Like, they thought that it was a real myth that they were, like, you know, making a horror movie about. But it's not, you know, it's just something that they made up. Like, they thought the Blair Witch was like an actual myth. A lot of people did after that movie came out.
Even people that were aware the Blair Witch Project was a movie still thought there was a Blair Witch legend in Burkittsville,
Right, because it just seemed
because
so
it became like
specific.
a tourist hotspot after the movie.
It did,
so.
yeah. They also made like 2 other straight-to-TV documentaries about this movie that are tie-ins. They made The Curse of the Blair Witch. They made The Burkittsville 7, which is specifically about the kids that got killed by by Rustin Parr. And they made another one called Sticks and Stones, which was basically like The Curse of the Blair Witch, but it almost felt like leftovers from The Curse of the Blair Witch. I don't know why.
Okay.
That one's not worth watching. That's the background is it was a huge thing, and it had been hyped up for a long time. And there was even like separate documentary movies for the movie. I know Curse of Blair Witch came out beforehand. I assume like Sticks and Stones came out after, and Burkittsville 7 came out after, just to ride that wave. But yeah, like The Curse of Blair Witch had like Michael's real brother in it. It had like real relatives of the actors and stuff.
Oh,
and
interesting.
And real good actors who are doing talking head shots for this. You know.
Oh, they had David Byrne. Okay.
They got David Byrne, Chris France, all of them. And so it was a big deal. And yeah, one of the biggest net grosses. Like, there's a rough figure like that this was made on 30,000 or something. But the directors both said they didn't spend like hardly anything. They don't even know how much they spent because it was hardly.
Yeah,
anything.
I was going to say you could easily convince me it was well under 30,000.
Yeah, and I'm sure it was.
Zero production value in the movie, and I mean that as a compliment, though. Yeah.
The movie itself is just 3 actors who were told to go in a general specific direction where things
it's
are
mostly
just set
improvised.
up. Yeah, and it's all
dialogue
improvised.
wise.
So, I mean, that in itself is incredible. That you got a coherent product out of it. And there really is. Like, there are themes to this movie based off just this improvised wandering. But anyway, I'll get into my notes.
I'm so scared.
So it starts with the classic found footage opening text, that I think, ended up becoming a cliche. This all really happened. These were found.
That's also something that it's
Texas
a
Chainsaw
cliche
Massacre
and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Fargo you mentioned
Right.
earlier. Like it goes beyond found footage. It obviously works most effectively in found footage.
But this is, I guess, probably the first movie that straight up was like these tapes were found like in this area.
But there's going to be some asshole that says the last broadcast came out first, and I guess we just have to mention that. But last broadcast, I remember being like kind of into it, and then it just had like one of the worst endings in film history.
Yeah, here's my note. This movie was inspired by the last broadcast, a movie that sucks.
Yeah, maybe a bit harsh.
It did suck. I remember getting excited because I was like, this Like this inspired the Blair Witch Project, and I was like
yeah, you go watch it
terrible.
the way if you really like Saw, you're like, oh, I'll go and watch Cube, and you find out Cube is actually pretty good, but then you watch The Last Broadcast and it's like, oh,
right. It's like the ending's terrible, but I didn't like really any of it, so I don't know. I get how it was inspired, but anyhow. So yeah, it starts pretty normal. Heather's just in her house. Josh comes over. Josh is some guy who is also in the film department with her. Has the camera.
Yeah, she and Josh are friends.
They're friends.
And then Josh is friends with Mike, but she doesn't know Mike.
Yeah, and they sound like they're listening to like an REM cover band when they pick up Mike. I don't know if you recall that.
I always heard REM described as college rock, and sure, they're in college.
Yeah. Fun fact about that. Josh, as you know, no spoilers, but he's not in a portion of this movie. And it was actually supposed to be Mike that was not supposed to be in a portion of this movie. Josh was relieved that he was the one selected to, I guess, leave because he wanted to go to a Jane's Addiction concert.
Okay.
So
I was thinking it's regardless of what you have to do in your personal life, this is, I'm sure, a miserable movie to film. I would have just thought of that.
It's just, it seems like they're just hiking. So hiking and pretending to be really scared. And getting really
they're dealing
scared.
with genuinely bad weather, like in real life. Like
that's true. And it like emotionally, it took a toll on at least Heather. I know for a fact, and I'll get to that.
The actors and the characters all have the same name, right?
Yes.
Heather plays Heather, and that's something I remember. The first Paranormal Activity did that because I remember thinking like, whatever the boyfriend or the husband's name, like he has a weird name, and I'm like, why did they give him that name? Then I looked it up. Oh, that's the actor's name. Okay, so I guess his parents are to blame. I don't know.
They do the same thing in Blair Witch 2.
Micah was his name.
Oh, Micah. They do the same thing in Blair Witch 2, even though Blair Witch 2 isn't found footage and it's all acting and whatnot. And like there are actual like known actors in that movie, and they're using their.
Not that I knew any of these people, but I like looked them up. It's like, oh, I've actually seen Michael in something. Mike in
Josh has like a successful career, but you know what? He's unrecognizable though. Like I can't.
Yeah, he doesn't look the same.
He doesn't look at all like he does in this movie because I've seen him in a bunch of stuff and didn't know.
Yeah, he's in the Shaggy Dog.
He's in the Shaggy Dog. He's in like
he
Bates
doesn't look...
Motel. But other than that, I know like Heather retired from acting.
Okay.
I know she was in like an episode of Always Sunny. That was about it. So, they're making a documentary about the Blair Witch, and they have a scouted out, I guess, filming weekend planned. I will say, so right out the bat, we start with like a bunch of talking head shots of like random civilians, which is something they, obviously drop after 10 minutes or so. The old guy that they meet in the grocery, that guy really sold it. Because like, here's the thing, too. They planted people and didn't tell the actors who was in on it and who wasn't.
Oh, interesting.
Because, again, the actors thought the mythology was real.
Okay,
and that it was a real story. So there were people who were there, and they just went up asking random people, and some of those people were able to...
Had no idea what they were talking about or something.
And so there are people in the movie who, like, don't know anything, who are just sort of like, yeah, I think I maybe heard something about that. You know what I mean?
That is fascinating. And I will say, not disagreeing with you about the old guy, I love the mother.
Yeah, I was going to say, they're both great. Because she's great because of the baby who, like,
yeah, the baby is completely... And then she does that wonderful improv when she's talking about, like, the someone getting killed or something, and then the baby has, like, this kind of reaction. She's like, no, it's just a story, honey. It's like, oh, my God, that is amazing. Yeah. That is so good.
Yeah, and she says, oh, it's just a story. Then she mouths, it's real.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Yeah, she was great. But the guy was great, the old guy, because they ask him about it, and he sort of looks, like, surprised by it, but in, like, a very naturalistic way. He's sort of like, oh, that's funny. Someone's asking me about that. I haven't thought about that in so long. And he, like, completely lore dumps, but in, like, such a realistic way, like, to where he, like, can't quite remember certain things, but, like, it comes across very natural. Because he's the one who tells them about the Rustin Parr guy.
Yeah. I was going to say, what's all the information we get from these people? We don't have to go, like, person by person, but what's the general gist?
We learn that Rustin Parr was this crazy old hermit. I don't even know
in the 40s or something, right?
Kids were going missing, and it eventually came out that he had killed kids in twos. He had one face the corner, and while he killed the other one, and then he would, eventually kill the other one. He told people that the Blair Witch made him do it, or that like the spirit of the Blair Witch made him do it, or whatever. And that's really pretty much it. Other than the everything else that's mentioned is like vague. Oh yeah, I heard there was maybe a witch up there, and like I saw something like a little apparition or something like that.
And then there's the crazy lady who claims that she saw like a furry or a hairy woman or something.
Yeah, and she's the town crazy, but she doesn't come out saying like absolute nonsense, and she's not.
No, she's not Crazy Ralph in Friday the 13th.
Yeah,
it's not movie
exactly.
Crazy.
But yeah, she's a production designer.
What the hell did she do on this movie? There's no production design.
She's one of the people who did the stick figures, the famous stick figures.
Yeah, I was going to say it's that's the only thing really.
That and she painted the Rustin Parr house with the like children handprints and stuff like that. Stick figure thing wasn't anything the directors came up with, or there was nothing. That was just like one day they were in the woods and they just started making those to think why not, and then of course it became.
Are the stick figures mentioned in the Talking Heads shots? I don't remember.
No, I don't believe so. The rocks are...
The rock piles are,
well, the rocks aren't. That's a thing I was going to bring up, is that the rock piles aren't brought up, but when they come across the rock piles, Heather says something like, what did Mary Brown say about rocks? But they don't show it.
Yeah.
So I always thought that was weird. But yeah, so she did a bunch of production stuff on this movie. And also production designers also had part in scaring them at night.
Sure, yeah.
Because there was only probably like 5 people working on this movie other than the actors. Another thing I think is interesting is after all that, there's like a kind of a pause. We get them at the cabin, wherever they're at, before they actually set out. And the last talking head shot we get are those 2 fishermen, which I think is maybe one of the weirder parts of the movie. Those 2
One
guys.
of the fishermen is unfortunately the least believable person they interview, I think.
Yeah, but I think it's also just the way he speaks. Like, he sounds like he's not as believable, but he also just has a really weird manner of speaking.
Okay.
And every time I watch it, I think, is he not believable, or is he just like weird? Like, does he just
They just happen to run into the town's Nicolas Cage or something.
Yeah. But I mean, these guys were definitely like plants. Yeah, they definitely lore dumped some stuff. Because here's an interesting thing. Like, we learned so much about Rustin Parr and all that, but we don't learn anything about the Blair Witch, really. Like, we learn a couple little tidbits from their black and white segments, which there's only like 2. And they don't really go
at the cemetery.
Yeah, and they just mentioned Coffin Rock and all that. But like, the Blair Witch is like the whole thing, and it covers so much of the curse of the Blair Witch,
And that, to me, is another thing that really adds to the realism of the movie.
Right.
What we're seeing is not a completed movie.
Right.
I mean, in the context of the movie, it stops becoming a movie at a certain point. But
yes,
they just never got around to filming the scenes where they actually say what the hell the Blair Witch is. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's great. And that's one of the cool things about the movie, is that they never like explore that, but it's obviously important part to the movie. But also maybe it's not. Like, clearly it's possible that the Blair Witch has nothing to do with anything, you know what I mean? But that's the beauty of it. So yeah, like, none of the talking head shots like ever explain what the Blair Witch is, and they never get around to it during the black and white parts. So yeah, I thought that's cool.
And most importantly, they never have that exposition when we get to the non-movie part where the characters are like, oh, this is happening, this means it's the Blair Witch. Remember that the Blair Witch does this. They never do any of that movie crap.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the things I love.
Feels authentic the entire way.
Then the next morning, they leave the car, and you get a really, really ominous shot of the car as they walk away. Maybe it's not as haunting the first time you watch it, but when you rewatch it, it's like, there's something really...
Yeah, it just holds on it a little too long.
They hold on it so long to where it's like,
to.
It makes you feel uncomfortable, because you're like, you realize when you're rewatching it, especially, they're never going to get back to that car, and they're never going to come close.
Yeah, and they're never getting back to that Scooby van. Or mystery machine, excuse me.
Exactly. You're just going to be thinking about the mystery machine is lovingly recreated. It's like a shot-by-shot recreation, that, like, some of it.
All right, now, can you explain... They have 2 cameras. Josh is usually carrying one. Heather's usually carrying the other. Heather's camera's like on all the time. I don't understand the battery situation.
Okay.
I'm sure there's a way, but
I don't either.
The different kinds of cameras, right? One is video.
Yeah.
I'm expecting you to explain this because you probably know this stuff better than me. You have made films before.
Well, one is definitely
I'm expecting you to jump in here.
One's like a professional film camera that they stole from the school.
I thought they borrowed it. They
borrowed it. Well, yeah, but Josh makes a comment in the beginning where he's like, "I got it. No one knows I got it, but I got it."
Oh, okay.
But you know, I think they also mentioned later that like they have to get it back by a certain day. So
yeah, Mike, I thought was the one that got it.
Well,
I thought they were relying on Mike to get the.
I think he was probably talking about the sound equipment because Mike was there to do sound. Right. So Josh got that.
Does a terrible job, by the way. No, he does. I'm just talking about like how subtle some of the sounds are, but that's the movie.
Yeah, so really, the only time he's actually doing sound is the 2 black and white parts.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
like we really don't even get to see him do it. That, and like there's one part where he's doing the sound in the middle of the night when they're hearing something. Yeah, so Josh has like the nicer camera. That's the one that's in black and white. And then
yes.
I think Heather has...
They refer to it as like 16. It's 16 millimeter.
Yes.
That's film.
Right.
And that's the one that's running not nearly as often, but it still runs a little bit. It mostly runs when they're actually trying to film documentary scenes.
Right, and they reference a couple times like that they don't want to use it or that they need to use it like very sparingly, you know, because it's film and you know you can only afford so much. And then Heather has, I believe, just a standard camcorder.
Now, why is it? Is there any reason why it's black and white?
I don't think it has to be black and white. I think it's probably a filmmaking choice for it to be black and white. No,
filmmaking choice.
I think
that's what I was thinking
to
too.
Differentiate.
Oh, to differentiate. Yeah, I no, you're probably right. I was thinking too. There's a very small part of this movie. Maybe it's even bigger than a very small part. But there's a little bit of this movie that's kind of like. These are kind of pretentious film school people. Heather mainly, but there's a little bit of that.
The theme of the movie is Heather's obsession with filmmaking.
Well, yeah.
No, I think especially like in the last scene, without saying anything.
Yes, the last scene, for them to differentiate. Yeah,
I believe you see Heather's camera, but you're hearing the audio from Mike's. So like you're seeing from Heather's point of view, but you're hearing her yelling from another room. And so I guess that...
It's because Mike wasn't running sound.
Exactly.
Right? I don't know.
I think it's mainly to differentiate, but also, I mean, maybe that film camera just shot in black and white. I don't really know. I've never shot on film, so I mean, I'm not super well versed on that. But I also think maybe there's a mood to it, like for the actual documentary.
Oh, sure.
You know, there's a mood for her sitting on Coffin Rock, and she's talking all like slow and professional and whatnot. Honestly, the film that Heather is trying to make is essentially what ends up being The Curse of the Blair Witch.
Sure, yeah, that's kind of what I was picturing when you were talking about that.
I think it's cool that they're basically just like wandering without knowing where they're supposed to be going, because like there are things that they come across way later than they're supposed to, way earlier. Like the stick figures, for example, they were supposed to find on like the first day.
Yeah, and those are way later. The movie really makes you wait for them. The Coffin Rock is like the first landmark, I think, that they get to, right?
Yes.
And what's the importance of Coffin Rock? That is where like a search team was killed?
The actual Blair Witch was like tied to a tree or whatnot. You know, the lady who ends up being known as the Blair Witch. Yeah. And kids in the neighborhood think they like see her and think that they're having visions of her and nightmares of her. So they go to find her body, basically. And there's a search team sent to find them people who went searching for her, you know, and they were all dead and like disemboweled and whatnot. And then if I recall correctly, like they find the kids that Rustin Parr killed also on Coffin Rock or something like that.
Okay, yeah, well, there was also something about the search team was torn apart, disemboweled on Coffin Rock.
And then they weren't there.
And then they weren't there, but there was another search team that was there long enough to see that the bodies were there, but then when they returned there, they weren't. It's a little confusing.
It was that like people discovered it, and then when they got, I guess, people to come take the bodies, they weren't there anymore. Not to spoil Curse of Blair Witch too much, but a big thing about it is that like every 40 years something happens.
Oh, they do like an it thing.
Basically, because like the Rustin Parr stuff happens like 40 years after the Blair Witch dies. Like, I mean, it's like in the 40s, and that happens in the early 1900s or late 1800s, and then this happens in like the late 90s. You know, it's something loosely like that. Like the Blair Witch Project is like the 40 years later thing. You know, I don't know if that was ever the director's intention, or if that was just for the Curse of Blair Witch, like different people came up with that.
That seems like a Twin Peaks: The Lost Files or whatever. That seems like a little like
the Mark Frost thing.
Mark Frost kind of thing, doesn't it?
But yeah, I don't know how much of that was ever intended, but it's in the Curse of Blair Witch, so
it's canon to somebody.
So a cool thing is that we don't really see what happens the first night that they sleep. We just kind of hear Josh explain that he heard a couple noises, and they're both like a normal person, you know. They're not like terrified, but they're just like, man, I would be freaking out if I heard that.
That's weird.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, that would be scary. Right out that day is when they discover all the rocks. They find, or they're looking for a cemetery or something like that, and they find all those piles of rocks. And Heather's like, what did Mary Brown say about rocks? What was that she said about rocks? But
whoa, what is this? Dude, guys, do you remember something that Mary Brown said the other day? What was the story from the Bible that she was telling us? Fuck, I wasn't listening to her because I thought she was a lunatic. It was Esau, but it was something about a pile of rocks.
Oh, she was totally telling us about her rocks.
Well, what the fuck was it about a pile of rocks?
No, but you're saying she didn't actually say anything about rocks?
So she probably
in the
did.
Talking Head scenes?
She probably did, and they cut it out of the movie for some reason.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, we don't see...
the viewer, don't see her say it.
Now, let me ask you a question. Does that take away a bit from the reality that this appears to be partially edited?
No, because I think the way that this was marketed was, you know, there's hours and hours of footage condensed to, like, just... you know, a coherent narrative. Almost.
Okay, sure.
I mean, I know that that's how they promoted it.
I wasn't sure about that because obviously it is edited. We don't have 6 straight days of Heather's POV. Obviously that. I was just asking.
Yeah, and I mean also, like I said, they had a way longer edit, and it just like apparently did not work at all. You know, I love this movie, but it is a hard movie to watch for like that long. You know, you wouldn't want to watch an hour 50 of this.
I agree.
You know,
and this is a really great movie. It's really well done. It's not entertaining. It really isn't. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing. Like,
honestly, I mean, I gotta disagree. To me, like, this movie's super quotable, and it's just like...
What quotes do you use from this film in your day-to-day life?
I'll tell you.
I'm curious.
I'll tell you.
Yesterday,
it's all like not even like big quotes. They're like, I've just seen this movie so many times. Like sometimes, like the other day, my girlfriend said something, and I was like, "Would that be a full of shit statement?" Which is something that Josh says to Heather at some point. There's just like little things that I just,
and not so much like big Blair Witch lines, but like 90s kind of lines, because we haven't said this yet, but these characters are very 90s.
Well, yeah, like Josh wanted to go see that Jane's Addiction concert. He wanted to get out of the movie.
Yeah, the characters are 90s because the actors are 90s, I guess. But we get a lot of like that kind of grungy, like flannel and jeans look.
Yeah, they're all dressed the same. They're literally all wearing the same outfit.
Classic 90s beanies.
Exactly. Yeah, they're wearing beanies, plaid shirt, blue jeans. Every single one of them. But I mean, it also makes sense. They're going hiking.
I have waterproof hiking trousers myself, you know, but yeah, I don't wear jeans hiking.
Here's a quote that I like. They go back to the rock area, or no. So they're at the rock area, and then they get a shot of it on the 16.
Yes.
It opens with Mike saying, "Here we are back at the rock again, rock thing, cemetery deal," and then they start shooting it. Just thought that was fun. A little funny.
So Blair Witch Project is your quotable movie. It's your Turner and Hooch, because Turner and Hooch for me, for whatever reason, is the most quotable movie ever. No one remembers Turner and Hooch. I don't care. I think it's a masterpiece. I think
love
it's one
Turner
of the best comedies ever made. It's amazing.
What? If you're hungry, finish the hamburgers. Eat the buns. Eat the buns. You're not thirsty. You're not touching the water, the orange juice, crab-apple. What am I supposed to do? Make you a margarita?
Maybe my favorite Tom Hanks movie.
Yeah, I think it's mine too, which is insane. It's insane, but I think it is mine.
But yeah, so like the first night happens and nothing crazy happens. They just hear some noises. And Josh thinks it's hillbillies trying to scare them, or at least.
So this is the second night then, right? Or
yeah, and he posits that it's hillbillies.
Also, we got to talk about the sound design. How freaking subtle it is, because they're doing this like, oh, do you hear that? Do you hear that? And you have to really try to hear.
Right.
It's amazing,
especially on that third or fourth night where I think it's the fourth night where shit like really goes down.
Yes,
like it builds in a very good way. What they were actually doing, that noise they were hearing, is like probably one of the more popular trivia things. It's the directors and the production designers and whomever was working on the movie, and they're just taking sticks and hitting trees with the sticks. Mm-hmm. And I guess it makes an echoey, clanging kind of sound.
The actors didn't actually know what was happening.
Right. No, they didn't know anything. I mean, they knew eventually, especially, that things were going to happen at night, but they were like actually sleeping. They were actually woken up. And yeah, like, I mean, they would let them sleep for like 3 or 4 hours and then do something like that.
And of course, it's worth noting that the actors are actually running the camera. That was actually something that they had to find actors that knew what the hell they were doing. They couldn't just hire anybody.
And that's the thing too, is like they're, the two credited directors of this movie, but like the actors might as well have directed this movie.
It's like in the movie Roar, how the Lions are granted co-writing credits because they improvise. It's very much like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, the actors should get writing and directing credits, honestly.
I agree. But yeah, like I was saying earlier, I think Heather's like insistence to film everything is a really interesting aspect to the film. I think gets like some poignant lines out of the movie later.
Sure. Was that now? I would imagine that came from Mirek and Sanchez. Like we don't have a movie if you don't film everything.
Well, right.
I mean,
but I think I think they use that plot device well, because also so often in found footage movies, why is the person
why are they filming? Yeah.
I think it's an interesting thing, and it's something that is acknowledged in the movie. Mm-hmm. That Heather is like turning their tragedy.
It's all I fucking have left.
Right. She's turning the tragedy into like a movie. Mm-hmm. I just think that's a really interesting thing that they do.
They could have gotten to a point where like, no, I'm filming because we're not going to make it out here, and if someone finds us, I want to know what I think they should. They never really be like, people can find it, but I guess they don't. They're not. Most of the movie, they just think they're lost.
Right. They don't. I mean, especially by this point. But also, I do think in part like Heather had that in mind, and I don't know if there's a specific line to it, but I feel like it's alluded to, especially towards the end, like that's why she's filming. Especially the scenes where like towards the end where shit's getting really dire and it's just her and Mike. She'll just like set the camera down and just like go do something. Or like she'll be filming like when something she absolutely should not be filming is happening, like with the bloody stuff, but I'll get to that. Anyhow, I do think it's really interesting how they worked that in. I think it's a good theme. It makes Heather like a well-rounded character, even though she's just like just a person improvising,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like not too much like again, this day is mostly spent just wandering. Because by this point, I mean, this is like, the third day? So by this point, they know that they're lost.
They are consulting a map, but it's also pretty clear at this point that it's not nearly as well scouted out as Heather thought it was, or at least said it was.
And also, I think people pile on Heather a lot, even like in retrospect. And I understand why.
You mean, like people talking about the movie, or
right?
You mean, okay.
Yes, because I mean, I think you understand why Josh and Mike would be mad that she's like seemingly just leading them into nowhere, and like keeps getting them more and more lost. But I think in retrospect, like obviously there's like a paranormal thing going on. Then they're walking in circles, and it's I think eventually you have to realize it's not Heather's fault that they're walking in circles.
Yeah. Well, I still think that's a little debatable.
The paranormal aspect of it?
Even if we acknowledge that there is paranormal activity afoot. That doesn't necessarily explain them being lost. It explains some other things.
Well, but it does, because a big thing about it is that she had a compass and was going in a direction.
Oh, sure. Okay, yeah.
And then they ended up in the same spot.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, well.
See, I think that was the whole point of that one scene.
No, I know the scene you're talking about, but also,
yeah,
the other two are the first to point out that's the same log, right? That's the same log. We already crossed that. And she eventually breaks down. You know, we barely see Heather in this movie, but she's behind the camera. But she breaks down, acknowledges it's the same log.
Right?
Is it?
I mean, I think it was. It looked like the same.
I think it was.
I personally think it, like, just based off of the footage, I think it was the exact same one. Because I mean, it's. I
think it was, but I'm just saying, in the context of the movie, you're three people, you're lost in the woods. A log might look the same as another log. I'm sure it is the same log within the movie, but okay.
I just think it's too recognizable because it's not even really a log. It's like a big tree, and it's like got a very. Is. I know, but it's like it's a big. You know, it's like a huge downed tree. And
sure, but it's also not the first one of those things that they cross in the movie.
Yeah, but the other ones are like little logs. Like, I mean, this is like a big, specific looking tree. And it's by a specific creek, you know what I mean?
I don't even think necessarily that I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm just saying...
I'm just saying...
I think the film does revel in this ambiguity.
I just think that I can tell that it's the same log, so I feel like they would be able to tell.
Okay,
but I don't know.
Sure.
Just because it's also at like a fork in the creek. Like there's like a curve in the creek, I mean. And then that's where the tree is.
Yeah, creeks
like
famously always go straight. Okay, at this point, I'm doing devil's advocate. I
can tell.
Yeah, sure.
It's specific. It's very specific, and we see like a long shot of them crossing it earlier. So by the time we go back, I think it's recognizable. By the way, point is, you know, also they acknowledge that the creek's not that long and the area's not that big that they're lost in.
Yes, but I also like the area not being that big could be just a massive fuck up on their part, though. Maybe the area is just way bigger than they thought it was. I think that is explainable.
But they acknowledge that they walk the length of the creek and end up where they were initially. Sure. You know what I mean?
Listen, do they even know how to read a map? Okay, we have that.
Well, we don't know.
Famous scene earlier where they're, you know, the miles and kilometers. They're getting those not necessarily mixed up, but they're, you know, which do we use? Like, because Josh uses kilometers, and she's like, "Well, we're in America, we're not miles." Maybe they got a Canadian map.
I guess the assumption is that Heather would be the only one who can, and that's why she's fucking them over by not getting them to the right spot. But my point is, like, if they're going north all day or going south, whatever it was, for multiple days, and they end up in the same spot, then clearly, like, something else is happening, you know? I think that's the implication. I think it's all implication.
I agree. It's certainly an implication. I'm just saying, I don't know how evil, demonic witchcraft works in a reality in which that stuff exists. Does it make you get lost? Maybe.
Well,
it's not established that it does. I'm not saying it needs to be established that it does. If a movie revels in the realism like it does, it probably shouldn't establish that that's what happens. I'm just saying, you know.
Well, I will say that a part of the Blair Witch legend is that you lose time and you lose things like that. So maybe like direction is a part of it.
Okay.
I will say also completely irrelevant since this is a 2016 movie that is not.
Sure.
You know,
the Adam Wingard movie.
Yeah, that obviously is a whole nother, but that plays into it.
I've never seen it, but I think there's like a time loop or something in that movie, isn't there?
There's a time loop, and like they acknowledge that like direction gets muddy, you know. So I think it's a thing. But yeah, the beauty of this movie is everything's implied. There's nothing that's ever stated.
That's I love that we're arguing about stupid shit like this because it means the movie, like, because of the majority of the movie is the supernatural. Like, there are points in the movie, and I don't think the ending quite can be explained by this. I think maybe, I don't know. Yeah. I would have to really do a thought experiment on this, but a lot of the movie, especially in the beginning, first night, Josh is the only one that hears anything. He tells them about it.
Yeah.
You can go much of this movie thinking Josh is the one fucking with them. Absolutely.
Are you just coming up with that right now?
Well, I've thought about it, you know, in the past when I've watched this movie, but is that a thing in one of the documentaries or one of the movies?
No, it's not, but you've just stumbled across, like, the biggest fan theory. But the actual theory is that Josh and Mike are like working together to like kill Heather or like torture her or something.
Okay.
Which I mean is crazy, and you know, obviously.
I was tempted to say Josh goes crazy, except if he hears it the first night, he hasn't gone crazy yet. It makes more sense if he goes crazy the longer they're lost.
The only thing about it is like Josh can't have made those noises.
Yes, that's
with the
true.
children, and just with the noises from in the distance. You know,
he could have put the rocks in front of the tent. He could have done that. Mike could have done that. Heather could have done that. You know.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's mainly supported by the end of the movie where you hear Josh in the distance, and then you know them in the house and whatnot. But at this point, we're at the third night, and this is where they start hearing the sounds like clearly, the distant sounds. But yeah, so that's when they got the shot of Mike like just looking scared and like recording the sound, and like Heather's like making him record the sound, but he doesn't want to. I think really a reason why people hate on Heather about getting lost and stuff is because she's very insistent that she knows where they are.
Yeah.
Like, even by the third day when they're like clearly lost, she's still like, no. We had to hit the most direct location to get to the spot. Now we got to hit them the most direct way back, you know?
And I thought it was men that never asked for direction.
Very good. There you go. But yeah, so after the third night is when they lose the map.
Well, and this is also when they find the rocks outside the tent.
That was when they have the 3 piles of rocks.
Because they do pack things up in a hurry. So it is kind of believable that they would have forgotten the map. We found out later it wasn't forgotten, but...
You know, they're even questioning, like, are we sure that those rocks weren't there? And she's like, there's 3 piles of rocks, and the tent is directly in the middle of it. Like, we would have noticed.
Again, going back to, we never understood, or we never got confirmation what the rocks were. When you first see them, I think they count there's like 7 piles of them, right? And there were 7 dead children. So like, okay, are these some kind of grave thing, or like what is this? Now that we see it outside the tent, I'm thinking it's like, oh, this is marking that these people are going to die, right?
Right. Yes. Very possibly. That's like, I guess, how the first thing they notice after that night. And by this point, like, this is the day when they start getting pissed off with each other, like, for real. But the other 2 days, like, Mike is getting frustrated. And, you know, he says, like, you know, I got to say, I don't really trust you.
Yeah, he's only mad at Heather, too. It's not like...
but by this day, they're, like, pissed. You know, everyone's upset with each other.
Well, and it's specifically you lost the map, too. You know,
and then, yes, exactly. And then this is like a good line when Heather says, like, it's hard to get lost in America, and it's even harder to stay lost. And then Mike says, well, we're doing a pretty goddamn good job of being lost.
Yeah, there's a few... earlier in the movie, they say something about, like, you can't get lost in America or something, and it's like...
And then, well, this is the first time that she says it again later. And then they start singing the Star Spangled Banner.
We mentioned the kind of the pretentious film school people, but this is like the naivete.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, the naivete
of the American, which is captured... I don't want to say beautifully, but it's captured in a lot of those Amazon cannibal movies. The Green Inferno, Eli Roth. Hostel, like these happy-go-lucky Americans, also Eli Roth, you know, going to like, oh yeah, you know, nothing, no harm can come of us, we're Americans, and then boom, you're in Serbia or whatever, and you're food for Ruggero Deodato.
But I also think, like, it might just be a hopeful optimism, you know?
Yes.
Or, like, also just a facade for the other 2 people that are there.
But again, that like America stuff, though, that's definitely, if it's completely improvised by Heather Donahue, there seems like there's a point to it.
I will say, like, I understand why people rag on Heather. She says a lot of stuff that's like, kind of roll your eyes at it, you know, because it was also like, if you're putting yourself in the situation, it would be very frustrating. And especially when you're trying to like get out of there and you're trying to focus and just like find your way out, and she's just filming everything and filming you getting mad and filming you crying, that would be, and filming every single thing.
No respect for boundaries. Absolutely.
Right. But anyway, so this is when they're wandering, and I guess they're like jumping over the creek, and Heather gets her legs wet, and they all start laughing at her, and she gets really mad. So then they just start like getting hysterical and like hysterically laughing. And Mike, in his hysteria, sort of laughs while admitting that he kicked the map into the lake.
Creek, yeah.
I'm sorry, it's fucked up. It's fucked up, but I kicked that fucking map into the creek yesterday. It was useless. I kicked that fucker into the creek.
I fucking hope he's kidding.
Wow! Mike. Holy shit.
I really fucking hope he's kidding.
Kidding?
Then it leads to like the most violent outburst in the entire movie. Josh goes up and like starts tugging him and like trying to knock him over, and Heather screams so loud that it like cuts the audio, like you know what I mean?
Yeah, it clips the audio, yeah.
In fact, maybe that's why they used Mike's audio at the end. Maybe Heather's audio was unusable.
Ooh.
I don't know, just an idea.
Interesting.
That causes the big rift, as it should. I mean, that's like really a crazy thing. Like a weird, crazy, like twist as far as twists go in this movie.
And to be fair to Mike, I mean, Mike, complete asshole move, of course, but his reasoning is it wasn't doing us any good. Heather, you didn't know what the hell you were doing. And that, you kind of understand it. You still don't necessarily know why you threw a map away, but you sort of get it.
I mean, think about it. This is like the fourth day.
Yeah, exactly. They should be back to the car by now. Oh, just thought of this, by the way. You know, speaking of, we talked about the Blair Witch parodies and recreations earlier. How do we not bring up the Psych episode yet?
Is it the
Sasquatch
Bigfoot episode?
Yeah, the Bigfoot, yeah. Where Gus thinks they're going to a hidden barbecue restaurant called the Sassy Quatch. Great stuff.
I honestly never even considered that as a Blair Witch.
They recreate the famous scene with Heather in the beanie into the camera with Lassiter.
If you're going to do a found footage parody, you got to do that.
Yeah.
That's classic. Yeah, that episode's weird. What is that, like season 6
That's the
or
last
7
season. That's one of the best episodes of the last season, I think.
That's
yeah.
fucking crazy.
Not a great season, but there's a few quality episodes in there.
I just want to apologize to Mike's mom and Josh's mom and my mom. I am so sorry, because it is my fault, because it was my project.
So after Mike does this with the map and that all comes out and everything, like everyone's pissed, that's when they find the stick figures, which by this point everyone's pissed at Heather for still filming everything, but they're all like in awe.
Yeah, they bust out the actual film camera for the first time in a long time. Which you have to think,
like fourth day, they're like so over this, but even they're like we got to film this, But yeah, they were supposed to find that like on the second day or first day or something, and they ended up finding it like way later. So basically what they would do is the directors and whomever would set a bunch of stuff up,
a direction,
and then would tell them to go like northeast or something, and I guess they just somehow missed it. I mean, if the woods are, I don't know, I guess it'd have to be bigger than they say, but like, I mean, I guess it makes sense that they wouldn't stumble across it. I mean, it's dense woods, but it's cool that they eventually found it, but they found it like way out of order. Like they weren't, by that point, they weren't even supposed to come across it, It's an interesting time for them to marvel at the stick figures, because at that point they really just want to get the hell out of there.
Goes to show how unsettling and how weird and unnatural those things are, though.
That's the thing. Like there were so many perfect accidents for this movie, like with the improv and everything. Like that was honestly the perfect time for them to come across it.
Do you have a theory as to what these things are?
I know that it's supposed to be like a witch figure of some kind.
Okay. But does it mark the witch's territory or something?
I don't know. The rocks and the stick figures is like I never like overthought it, because it's just
the rocks. I think are what I was saying. It's relatively easy enough to put together a compelling enough explanation that
and especially since she like counts it specifically.
Yes,
too.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. I never really thought about it like to an extent of like forming a definite hypothesis, other than like, it could be the witch marking her territory.
There's like a dream catcher kind of quality to them. Is that something someone years ago, decades ago, built to repel a witch? I mean, we don't know. It could
possibly be. It could also be like, we know that there's the only house in the woods is Rustin Parr's house.
Mm-hmm.
He could have made those, in his crazed state. He could have made those and put them out there. And then also it could also support the theory that there's nothing paranormal happening and they were just getting fucked with by random people in the woods, hillbillies, whomever.
Rustin Parr disciples.
Yeah, just or just like literally just people who live there who want to fuck with some random
because
kids.
I also brought that up, the Rustin Parr thing, because we haven't discussed this, but there is a very strong possibility Rustin Parr was just crazy, and Rustin Parr had nothing to do with Blair Witch.
Oh yeah,
based on what we know in the movie, it almost seems like it's unrelated.
Exactly. I mean, he could have been crazy and just like there's the legend, and he lives in the place where the legend is prevalent. Obviously, him just being a serial killer, murdering these kids, has nothing to do with the actual witch, you know.
Unless the witch made him do it, which is the legend. But yeah,
and there's actually like footage of him in the Curse of Blair Witch.
Now, who is the more compelling hillbilly lonesome weirdo, Rustin Parr or Travis Crabtree? Does Rustin Parr get his own theme song?
No, he doesn't.
Okay, there we go. That's really settled. Travis Crabtree,
you can't,
forever. The GOAT.
Wait a minute for me. Let's go back in the bottom, back where the fish are biting, where all the world's inviting, and nobody sees the flowers bloom but me.
We are, of course, talking about The Legend of Boggy Creek.
It's a weird movie. It's honestly kind of boring, but
yeah, but it's listed as an influence on this movie, which is kind of why I brought it up.
Yeah, I do think, people like kind of give like Blair Witch the props for inventing found footage, but it didn't, you know.
Well, Boggy Creek isn't found footage. It's presented as a full-on documentary. There's nothing like, oh, this is lost footage that we find. There's nothing that. It's just, it's a film that's lying to you about what's true and what's not, but it's not pretending to be anything other than a documentary, basically. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that definitely influenced the idea of them making this movie based on like the mythology, but without explaining it, you know. To me, I could see that connection. I don't know if that's exactly what it is, but
well, and of course Jaws is listed as an influence, mainly because Jaws, you don't see the shark for most of the movie. This movie, you don't see a goddamn thing.
Right. Well, there's one scene where you're supposed to, as I'm sure you know.
I don't think I do.
Oh, you don't know? Oh, we'll get to it. It's probably coming up. So yeah, then the fourth night happens. After they find the stick figures, there's more wandering, more bickering. They decide to camp again, even though like this is the night where they're definitely like, we cannot camp right now. Like, this is terrible. Like, we can't go another night out here. But nevertheless, they have to. And this is when the shit goes down, basically. This is when they hear the little kids, and then, like, all the hands start pressing against the tent, which is, like, the most obviously, like, terrifying part of the movie. And this is the part where they just go running.
This, to me, is the most why is the camera on moment of the movie, I think.
It's for light, because they're both pointing it at the ground. But yeah,
that's right. That's true.
But anyhow, what was supposed to happen here is there was a guy. I think it was a guy who was in like a white sheet of some kind off camera, who they were supposed to see. That's why Heather yells, "What the fuck is that? What the fuck is that?"
Oh, it's interesting that there's actually something there. Okay,
there's something there that she saw. And they ended up.
But they never get the camera on it.
Right. Well, they do, but you can't see it. Like, it doesn't show up because he's just like far enough away that the light doesn't pick it up. Oh, interesting.
Okay.
And so the directors were actually like happy that they ended up not getting it because they kind of rushed it together. And it's, you know, not like if it had gotten clearly on camera, it probably wouldn't have looked that scary.
It's interesting though that the what the fuck is that? I mean, again, we're talking about how great these actors are.
Yeah.
But that this is all improv.
Right.
I don't know how you fake that reaction if you know it's just a guy, a member of the crew. It's so amazing. Heather Donahue, shout out to her.
That's true. But you also, like, I mean, I doubt she could tell who it was or anything.
Well, sure, but she knows.
I think you can tap into that emotion. Like, if you're in the middle of the woods and it's nighttime and you're not comfortable... And then you're hearing these noises. Yeah, I'm just saying.
I'm just saying it's amazing.
It is amazing.
I'm not saying it's like impossible.
I agree.
But it's amazing how authentic that feels when deep down she has to know. It's just, you know, maybe some of the things are probably a bit like some of the noises and stuff are probably a bit more Like when they're not full on acting like freaked out, when they're more just like, oh, what is that? Like that.
Yeah.
That seems very easy to just genuinely. That's just genuine curiosity.
Right.
But when you have to go
all
to 11,
yeah,
that has to be hard to do because deep
I
down,
mean,
you know. I mean, at this point, I'm assuming she doesn't think it's a snuff film. Heather Donahue.
Yes. And but you're totally right. And I will say, like, that has an effect on Heather Donahue, the actor, which I'll get to later.
Yeah.
You might have read about that too.
Well, I haven't, but I can. Is it a Shelley Duvall kind of situation?
No. It's not like that.
Okay.
At the end of filming the last scene, she like cried for like 15 minutes straight. Like she was inconsolable for like 15 minutes straight without being able to do like anything, because it was just so much, you know, to film that last scene in the house and everything. And when they finally like had cut and everything was done, it was just like, I guess it was a lot.
Yeah.
So she was definitely tapped into like an actual fear. She carried so much of this movie, you know.
Back to what I mentioned earlier, she's the lead character, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
She's not on camera all that often.
Yeah.
It's more than a vocal performance because she is running the camera, but it's a different kind of performance really than any like.
Right.
You know, it's not like you can't talk about it the way you talk about other traditional acting performances, I guess.
No,
but it is
of course
amazing. Because she has, you're right, the movie really does ride on her in a lot of ways.
Think of all the great actors, Dennis Hopper, for example, in Blue Velvet, like incredible actor, incredible character. If that actor and was doing that character in a found footage movie, and it was, it would be cheesy and terrible. You know what I mean? There's a very like naturalistic.
Yeah, you need a
they
Michael
tap
Rooker.
Into.
You need Michael Rooker and Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. Like, there's just a certain type of performance that works better than it might not be as theatrical, but it's
that naturalistic style that they just nailed. I mean, this was one of the first things probably all of them did. Mm-hmm. You know, so it's
before the Shaggy Dog.
Incredible.
That's for sure.
So after they run away and all that, and they allegedly see the witch, but you know, never really acknowledge that it was definitely the witch or anything. They wait in the middle of the woods. They turn the lights off on the cameras, and they just wait in the middle of the woods with no tent or anything for the rest of the night. And then in the morning, they go back to their tent, and all of Josh's stuff is either stolen or covered with like a weird slime, which they don't explain like what that is.
You also don't really see it.
No, you just see that it looks like kind of wet.
Yeah, you can't really tell.
But yeah, so Heather like tries to figure out why Josh's stuff was taken specifically, but he doesn't care. He just wants to leave. You know, he's just like, "Are you not scared enough?" and all that. Like, can we just leave? This is the day where they are delirious, like just straight up.
It's straight up Eddie Murphy.
No, this is one of the great scenes where Josh has the camera and is filming Heather, and he says the thing. He says, "I see why you like this video camera so much, because it's not quite reality." Yeah, it's a good line.
Sure.
Plays into the whole Heather just trying to turn tragedy into a film sort of thing. Yeah, and then this is when they come across the same tree, which you posit might be a different tree. Maybe it is.
Just throwing it out there. I mean, I think, are they delirious enough that
they are?
Yeah,
but I'm not delirious watching it, and I think it looks the same. But
there's a couple possibilities. There's a possibility that it is exactly as it's presented in the film, that it's the same log. It's also a possibility that in the context of the movie, it's not supposed to be the same log, but it is the same log because they just shot it at the same spot because the actors missed their mark or something, you know?
Sure. I mean, there's a million possibilities.
With a really, really low-budget movie like that, there's plenty of explanations, I think.
And with a really low budget like this that is intent on not explaining things. On the surface level reading of it, they're realizing that they've been going in circles for days, which they've already realized that they've been not, like they can't figure out where they are. But this is like the point where they realize that after, 5 days, they ended up in the same spot. This is the part where Josh starts filming Heather, talking about how all she wants to do is make movies and whatnot. And she starts crying and stuff. And he says another good quote, "I want to make movies, Heather. Ain't that what we're here to do?" Yeah, and then he accuses Heather of turning their tragedy into a movie. And then the famous line, "You gonna write us a happy ending, Heather?" And then the next night, nothing seems to happen. They don't really film anything that night. But then the next morning, Josh is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if they were delirious the day before, now they're, like, exhausted delirious. Like, they're, like, this whole day, Mike and Heather are just, like, breathlessly, hardly saying anything to each other.
Mostly all they're saying is Josh. They're just yelling at him.
Well, they do that for a while, but then after that dies down, then they're just like wandering and hardly saying
They have
anything.
that nice scene where they're just, again, she sets the camera down and the two of them are
they're just
in
like
front of the
cuddling.
camera. Yeah. Like, and that to me feels very real. Like, these people just acknowledge, like, they don't really know each other. They don't like each other. They are just absolutely fucked and they don't know what to do.
Then they like kind of like I said, like breathlessly, or like, so I guess south didn't work, so you want to go east? Yeah, and then Mike says, which was the bad witch, the wicked witch of the east or the wicked witch of the west? And then
they're both bad. It's just one dies earlier. Come on.
Yeah, basically.
The wicked is in the name.
But either way, they decide to go east based on that. But yeah, very little is accomplished that day. We really see, like, that's probably the quickest day that goes by. They just don't show anything. There's nothing to show. But then that night, they hear Josh from afar. They hear his screams, which this is especially where it starts becoming possible, what you were saying about Josh just messing with them.
Yeah, I really don't think that holds up much, because I was kind of going back to, he was the one the first night who claims he heard something, even if we ignore the fact that a lot of those sounds came from the distance when they actually all hear them.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Josh wouldn't have had a reason to be, he's not crazy when they first go on them. So even if he went crazy during the thing, it doesn't explain that. So
yeah, like the Josh Mike being crazy, or not being crazy, but like luring Heather into the woods and like all this stuff. It's like, yeah, I never got
it's a bit
that
much.
theory, but it's why not?
Is this the famous beanie scene?
No, not yet. So there's a whole nother day. This is like the last day.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Because that morning is the day when they find like bundle of sticks thing with shirt.
The blood.
Right. Well, they don't notice the blood at first, and so Heather sees it and like hides it from Mike weirdly, and like doesn't tell Mike about it. I think this is the day when they do the cuddle scene, and it's just where shit gets really just dark. They're sad. And it's weird because, like, Heather takes the bundle of sticks and, like, throws it and, like, doesn't open it up. And then, like, a few shots pass by, and then she opens it, which I thought was weird. But, yeah, and then she finds all Josh's blood in there. Not all of it, but, Josh's blood and what looks like guts and stuff in there.
Yeah, I was going to say there's some, like, a pink thing or something.
Yeah,
it's not
like
blood.
A brain or something. You can't really tell.
Yeah, ear, who knows?
That's, like, one of the more intense, like, scream moments. And then she just washes her hands and, like, doesn't mention it to Mike. And then they're pretty much silent that whole day. And it's funny because there's the shot of Mike eating the leaf, which I remember so well. It hard cuts from that scene to the scene you're talking about of Heather giving the monologue.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy because
Lassiter scene.
And it's crazy because when you first see that shot of Heather, like that's the shot from the cover, that's the
poster, yeah.
Everyone recognizes it. It's crazy when you're just like in the movie and he's just like eating a leaf, and then you hard cut to like what the poster
happens,
of the movie. Yeah.
Other than perhaps the very end, this is the most famous scene of the movie.
Yes. And what's interesting about this, they were prepping the house for the film, and they were still prepping stuff, and Heather just like at this point, like they had already been out of the woods a couple days and stuff, because this was filmed in an entirely different wooded area, I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
So that they were, the actors were there, but they weren't like doing anything yet, and they were prepping the house, and Heather just took the camera and went into one of the tents outside and just filmed that, and it ended up being the most iconic scene from the movie and one of the best monologues probably in film history.
Sure.
And then as soon as she finishes the monologue, that's when they discover the house, the Parr house. A fun fact, it's not there anymore. They demolished it like pretty soon after that movie.
I was going to ask. I mean, I don't care if it's not there or not anymore, but I was going to ask, like, what was this beforehand? Was this anything? This isn't completely a set, like, from the...
I mean, it just looks like a house. I don't know what else it could be.
There's like some historic mill in the in the state park that some of this was filmed at. I'm like, I don't think that's the building, but like, you know, it might have had something to do with something like that.
I don't know.
Like there was some kind of mill in this area, and maybe this was like a house of someone who worked there. I don't know.
I know that they looked at like 8 or so different like dilapidated houses to film this part in. And they like didn't like any of them, and they found that one. They like stumbled across it, and like somehow got location rights or something to it.
Or maybe they didn't.
Or maybe
Are you sure they did? Yeah,
I'm not sure.
The movie like this, yeah.
And also, I mean, it's a dilapidated house. Like I don't know. I mean,
yeah, well, who do you need to get the rights from? The bank?
Either way, they filmed it, and it's what's interesting is that this house got demolished like almost immediately because I don't know if they filmed this in the same location. But in the sequel, The Book of Shadows, which came out the next year, it came out in 2000.
Yeah, rushed into production.
The characters of that movie go to the remains of the Parr house, which is demolished. Like they go to, so it's demolished even in
like immediate
universe. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But then also, it was the next year that after the movie came out, but Blair Witch was filmed in like
4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
maybe
whatever. So there's time for it to have gotten demolished.
Also, hang on. Circling back to, you said it was filmed maybe 95, 96. We don't really know, but a few years before it came out. Mm-hmm. Was the last broadcast truly an influence? Because the last broadcast came out in 98, I think, right? I think the last broadcast doesn't have shit to do with this movie. I think it's...
I just know that the directors said that maybe I'm wrong about it being filmed earlier then. I just thought it was.
We're wrong about something, I think. Whether it's the year of the last broadcast or whatever, yeah.
The last broadcast was 98. I just looked it up. No, it says that it was filmed in 97. The Blair Witch Project.
So Merrick and Sanchez just lied about the last broadcast? Or did the last broadcast impact its advertising or its editing?
I don't know. I never even thought about that.
We need another Blair Witch documentary to sort all this out.
Yeah, and they filmed the last broadcast in 98.
Well, I would feel bad for that film if it took more than a year to finish, if that's the end result.
That needs to be explored. I want an answer to that. But anyhow, they reached the Parr house. Fun little, not really a fact because it's more of just a nonsense observation, but on the left side of the house door, there are some sticks that appear to be arranged in the Dead Kennedys logo.
Is that completely coincidental, or is that crazy lady from town a Dead Kennedys fan?
I never looked it up, but she might be. But so they go in the house. It's in obvious disrepair. Children's bloody handprints on the walls and whatnot. And they hear Josh's voice more, And so they're running around. And then they start cutting between the cameras, like I said earlier, but they're using the same audio, so it's kind of disorienting. So you see Heather's point of view for most of the last part of this movie, but you hear Mike's audio. So, like, you see Heather upstairs while Mike goes down into the basement, and you hear him, like...
Josh! I hear him downstairs. Come on! I hear him downstairs! Come on! Josh!
He clearly sees or hears something down there, and when his camera gets knocked over, you hear Heather screaming super loudly, but it sounds distant. And anyway, if you've seen the all the different alternate endings, you'll be very familiar with the last couple lines of this movie because they use the same shots and then they show the alternate ending. And so when you click on any of the like 8 alternate endings, as soon as you hit play, you just hear Mike going, "I hear him downstairs!" And then he just runs full speed down the stairs. And you just hear the same line over and over. But anyhow, so yeah, and then, of course, most famous part of this movie, Heather goes downstairs and sees Mike just standing in the corner. And then her camera gets knocked over, too, and she presumably dies. And that's how it ends. The alternate endings are basically... So I think what happened was they were trying to sell this to a studio. They loved the ending. But the studio wanted something more
different, yeah,
dramatic.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
because the ending is so...
It's understated, for sure. And it's also because the ending doesn't make sense unless you were paying attention earlier when the guy, offhandedly mentioned the thing about the kids. Like, it's a blink and you miss it. Or you might not have even been paying attention to that part. You might have just forgotten about it
Because at that point, you don't know what the movie is.
Right. And so, it's very possible, and I would say even likely, that you'll watch this movie, completely forget about that line, and then that happens at the end, and you're like, why was he in the corner? I don't understand,
Yeah, I think when I first saw this movie, I didn't remember the line. It still was incredibly creepy.
Yeah, of course.
There was still something really creepy about it. I think the ending still really worked, but yeah, definitely. And I will say, I really admire this film for not doing any hand-holding.
Yes, of course.
Never tells you what's important. It never tells you exactly what this thing means, what that thing means. Part of me, and maybe a small part of me, wishes it did a bit more. I'm not saying I wouldn't want to change this movie, but part of me would want to see and maybe this is what the 2016 movie is. I don't know, but part of me would want to see this story, because I think the lore is kind of interesting, presented in a more traditional way.
Yeah, that's kind of what the 2016 one is.
Maybe even the filmmakers wanted to do that and they didn't have the money to do it. I don't really know.
Yeah.
There's enough interesting stuff in the little bits about the lore that I do know, whether it's from watching this movie or from the wiki dive that I went on the other night. Part of me wants to see this story, even if it's going to be bad or underwhelming. Part of me would want to see it presented in a different style, and just see what, a little bit more clarity. I love that we don't have that, but
yeah, I don't think
part
you
of me
will.
wants some clarity. Yeah,
Blair Witch, the 2016 movie, is a way more conventional movie for sure.
Yeah.
And just a
is it even found footage? 2016.
It is.
Okay.
But it's like,
I guess you have to. That's what Blair Witch is. It is the
right,
found
but Book of
footage
Shadows
movie.
isn't.
Well, I know. Yeah, I know. But that's the weirdo.
Yeah.
It's like if you make an Exorcist movie, there has to be an exorcism. Okay, look at Exorcist 3. There almost wasn't one, but they still had to put it in there because it can't be an Exorcist movie without an exorcism.
But it's a thing with with Book of
footage.
Shadows, people hate on it, but I'm really glad that they didn't do another found footage movie, especially one that they shit together so quickly. I don't know, because that's one of the things I really don't like about the 2016 one is these are clearly actors. They're all good-looking people, and they are all they give a lot of exposition, and and a lot of paranormal things happens in it that's overt, But it's if you're into just a completely different thing as far as the storytelling goes, then it could be cool. I can't get into it, but anyhow, the difference between the ending they shot and the difference between that and the alternate endings is that the ending they shot could happen. The alternate endings are all kind of crazy. All the endings are the same thing. They're all Heather going into the basement and finding Mike. But instead of him being in the corner, it's him crucified, or it's him floating, or it's him stuff like that. But I think the filmmakers wanted it to be you could watch this movie and think this definitely could have happened.
Yeah.
Or even that this definitely did happen at the time. People thought that.
Yeah.
I think the studio probably wanted a wow ending.
Well, sure. And especially going back to, I mentioned earlier, all found footage movies end the same. They all end ambiguously. Someone drops a camera or something.
Right.
In most of those found footage movies, the hack ones, it ends with a demon coming at the camera, a monster, and making a loud. Almost all of them end on a loud noise, I feel like. Probably. They all end with a camera drop. Even the good ones. Last Exorcist was pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, they all end in that kind of thing. But even this is the extreme subtle version of that. And it's and it sounds like what you're saying, it wasn't mostly a budget thing based on the other alternate endings. If they had the capability of doing something different.
You're right, but also they didn't have the money when they were making this movie.
Oh, I see. These were all reshoots?
Yeah, the studio made them reshoot the ending. And so all the reshoots are just for the very last shot. And then,
Okay.
they didn't use any of them.
Well, maybe we found what happened to the $30,000 then. I know.
Very-
maybe that's
very
all
possible.
in the last scene.
It could be.
Reshoots. Yeah,
Yeah, because they were all like an effect of some kind. Like one was him floating, one was him crucified. I mean, they were all like...
So none of them show Josh in this scene.
No, Josh never reappears.
Even though Mike does see Josh.
Well, maybe
Based on what he
does.
says. So yeah, he thinks he sees Josh. You're right.
We don't even know if he sees anything or if he just maybe hears something.
You're right. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, it's unclear. Because honestly, I was paying attention to that this time. Because I was like, hey, we're hearing Mike's camera audio. So maybe we can hear something that I like just never noticed. And what I did notice is that he's screaming Josh. And then when he goes down there, he kind of like more curiously says like Josh.
Yeah.
Like as
so maybe
though
he doesn't
is
even
seeing
hear
something.
anything. Maybe he's just checking to see if he's in that room.
Or maybe he sees something, or maybe he hears something, or there's a million ways.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so
Fascinating.
It's cool though. It's a great ending, obviously.
It's a perfect ending. I what is it about horror movies that some of them just have these amazing endings? Saw has a perfect ending.
Oh, of course.
You can complain about a lot of things in that movie. That ending is not one of them.
Right, it's perfect.
I would put this, Blair Witch Project, and Don't Look Now
among best endings.
Can you think of a better one off the top of your head? I mean, as far as horror movies go.
I would say in Ghoulies 3, it ends with a Ghoulie's hand coming out of the toilet to crush a beer. And then
and like also, as at least when we're recording this, folks, there is a Ghoulie prop, a Ghoulie puppet.
Oh, yes.
From Ghoulies 3, available on eBay. It's horribly discolored and looks weird as hell.
Yeah.
But
For
if this is still out there, yes, I'm surprised you haven't bought it yet. But if this is still out there when this episode is up, please tell us, listeners, if you.
I should make a
that
GoFundMe
Ghoulie.
just to buy it.
Yeah, I would donate $1.50 to that. I think.
And Ghoulies 3 is one of the best Ghoulies movies, like top 4.
Feck, what do you think of the Blair Witch Project overall as a film experience? Like, we're getting Avatar 2 here in a bit. I think Avatar 2 will be out by the time this episode's out. But Avatar was all about like the film. Nobody talked about Avatar as a movie. They always talked about it as an experience.
Yeah,
and that bugged the hell out of me. This, I think, kind of is an experience, and it's a completely different one than Avatar, but like it really does.
I will say,
like I was saying, you can't talk about it like you talk about other movies. It's something different.
I know that with this movie, I know a lot of people who like it and respect it, but would never watch it ever again.
That was probably my reaction when I first saw it, but I obviously eventually saw it more times.
I will say this might be. It's probably like at least top 5 of my most rewatched. Movie.
In between Ghoulies 3 and 4, somewhere like that.
Well, in between Ghoulies 3 and 1.
What do you think of this movie?
Meh.
Yeah, it sucks, right?
Yeah, it's not very good. No, it's like probably my favorite movie.
It's The Devil Inside.
One thing I noticed is like back when I used to like care about my Letterboxd top 4 or whatever, I noticed that like my number 1 favorite movie would change like every month or so.
Mm-hmm.
But my number 2 was always like Blair Witch, and I eventually just decided that Blair Witch is just my favorite movie because it's like for a long time it was like, oh, my favorite movie was Back to the Future for a long time when I was in like high school.
You were in high school for a long time?
That explains a lot. Incredibly long, like
at least 3 years. Yeah.
And then like for a while, like my favorite movie was Reanimator, and then
it's a classic.
It's a classic, but that was also like that got me into more B movie stuff, And then it was like Basket Case and Brain Damage and then Frankenhooker. I went through all 3.
Yeah. Basket Case is my
It's great.
favorite.
It's incredible. I think my favorite movie ever is tied between this, Basket Case, Brain Damage, and Frankenhooker.
No Ghoulies?
And Ghoulies, of course. Those are all tied. I realized the other day that like I just can't be picky with what I give a 5-star at this point. I give everything 5 stars now that I like.
I think I drew the line at Pieces. I'll give Pieces a 5-star, and that's like the everything else that I give 5 stars.
That's the worst 5-star.
Has to be a movie that I like genuinely think is amazing, not just that I really, really like. Turner and Hooch is a 4.5 star for me.
If I just enjoyed the movie all the way through, and I don't know, especially if it's like an 80s B movie, I just give 5.
I can't explain my
no,
my
I mean
reasoning.
your system's probably more normal.
What would you give Slave Girls from Beyond Infinity? Have you seen it yet?
I feel like I saw it a while ago.
All right. It's a classic. It's a masterpiece.
That's Full Moon, right? Or does it count, or is it Empire or something?
Yeah, it's one of those. The band is involved.
Well, Charles Band has never made a movie under 4 stars. Feel free to end the episode right there. No, I'm just kidding.
How about that one Puppet Master that's just a clip show? How about that one?
That one's
whichever
bad.
one that is. Legacy of Puppet Master or whatever.
It's not as bad as the Barbie and Kendra movies that they've been putting out.
Oh, is that the Tiger King one? It's that stuff?
Yeah, it's that and the Corona Zombies.
Was he Corona? I couldn't remember if Corona Zombies was Full Moon or
yes,
or Kaufman.
I thought that would at least be funny, but like it's literally just like
Hell of the Living Dead, right?
Yes, it's all like older movies. Like it's like a few movies. And just
Hell of the Living Dead is close to being a 5 star for me, by the way. That's one of those. It's not quite pieces, but it's
not
amazing.
the Corona Zombies version. Trust me.
I've never seen it.
They just like put in fart sound effects, and they just completely. God. They just like redub the whole movie to be stupid. It's terrible.
Oh no,
it's fucking unwatchable.
Some of the dialogue in that movie is so funny. Like, why would you dub it over?
Because they just made a new movie out of the scenes.
Yeah,
from
I know.
And they also infused it with other movies. I felt bad. Like
there's like the most creative use of the C word ever in Hell of the Living Dead. It's amazing. I can't remember the exact line, but it's amazing. Okay, so Blair Witch Project, superior or inferior to Hell of the Living Dead?
A superior for me, but I like
Rat's Night of Terror.
Superior. I wasn't crazy about Rat's Night.
Yeah, you don't like Rats. that came up in one of your.
I
like
should rewatch it. I should rewatch it. It's been a long time, but like I remember,
it's Dawn of the Dead with rats. To me,
I remembered
enjoying
things about it, but being bored.
Oh, hang on. We were talking about perfect horror endings, and I didn't bring up Rat's Night of Terror.
I don't even remember
the
how it
scene
ends.
Where it's people in hazmat suits. They take off the goggles, and it's just rat faces. It makes no sense whatsoever. Is that not the best ending in movie history? So again, your thoughts on this film? We got to wrap this up.
Oh yes, it's great. I mean, I feel like I can't say anything that I haven't already said while going through my notes. I mean, I just think every facet of this movie works. I think. I personally, unlike I guess a lot of people I know, I love rewatching this movie. I usually rewatch it every October. I'm glad that we did this because I was going to rewatch it this October. I forgot to. I just like know all the lines like by heart. I've seen it so many times. So it's great. It's just perfect.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Again, I mentioned this earlier. You said you're really entertained by it. I don't find it all that entertaining. I just really find it effective, and the performances have a lot to do with that. But just overall, it feels so authentic.
Yeah.
In a way that other found footage movies I've seen haven't felt. Like I see some found footage movies, and it's like, oh, that was good. I think I would have liked it more as a non-found footage movie. And even though I was talking about, like, I would like to see a different version of this story, to expand upon the lore, I don't think the movie would be better as a non-found footage movie. I just think I'd be kind of curious to see that. Maybe all I need to do is see Curse of the Blair Witch. I don't know, but
you'll like that. I think
it feels so authentic, and the acting is amazing.
Of course,
and really, what the filmmakers and the actors, maybe even more than the filmmakers, went through to make this. You have to admire it, even if you don't like it. And obviously, both of us like it. So
yeah, I mean, it's just like it's. I think they nail it. I also, like, I've seen a lot of found footage movies, and there's a lot of really good ones, and there's obviously a lot of really bad ones. But, like, this one always gets, I guess, credited for starting the genre, and it didn't really. But
it's funny, it didn't even really launch the movement, if you will, because, like, no one on Earth has ever said Paranormal Activity is the first found footage movie.
Right.
But that's really what launched the found footage craze.
Yeah, it's two different kinds, because like I think, for example, like a movie like Bad Ben was probably more inspired by Paranormal Activity because it's home and it's
set in a
security
home, cameras
and stuff. But I think if you're going out in the woods and you're filming a camcorder, Blair Witch like definitely set the tone for a lot of those movies. I've seen a million found footage movies. That's definitely the best one, and that aside of it just being my favorite. It's also the only one where the acting is believable from the start to the end. I mean, there's plenty where there's believable acting, but all the way, there's always something, you know.
Blair Witch, I mean, I know it's a movie, but I watched this with my mother the other night, and she was very confused. I had to explain that it wasn't a real thing. And then the explanation contained layers, because I had to explain, no, none of it was a real thing. Like, even the documentary was, like, everything was fake, and but it easily convinces you that it's not.
And then there are found footage movies like Cloverfield.
Yeah, Cloverfield's a good example. I like that movie, but
I love that
that's
movie.
A good example of found footage is just a style.
Right.
We're just giving you a different point of view of this kind of story, because we've all seen Godzilla or whatever, and we're just going to present that in a found footage style. And it's interesting for what it is, you know?
Right, and like to be able to present something in like an amateurish, like just a human, normal person's point of view, not a filmmaker's. And like that alone is what's scary about found footage to people. And especially in a movie like Blair Witch, where there are no effects or anything. So it feels like it feels like it's real, even if it's not. And even if you know it's not.
Yeah, so this is amazing, and all of that having been said, I think Face Off is the better movie. I enjoy it more. I just find it more entertaining.
It's more entertaining.
More rewatchable. But I gotta ask you, which of these two movies do you prefer? Reminder that Nicolas Cage does not grind on the ass of a young choir singer in Blair Witch Project.
That's true, but I did already say that Blair Witch Project is my favorite movie, so
sure,
it probably makes sense for me to say Blair Witch Project. Yeah. Face Off's a perfect movie. They're both perfect. I think they're both great. This was a slam dunk of a double feature. I mean, they don't go together or anything, but
well, we'll get to that. But I will say this season has kind of sucked for us. I mean, listen, we've done some good movies, but we haven't done the amazing, like, oh my god, like we did King Kong in season 2, and Halloween in season 2, and Nightmare on Elm Street and Shocker in season 1. We haven't had like those kind of like, oh my god, I just love this movie. These two movies. Oh my god, I miss doing movies like this. This is probably 2 of the top 3 or 4 movies we've done in the season so far, and this is like the 10th or 11th episode, so 22 movies, and this is the top 5% of that, you know, so yeah, absolutely. Slam dunk, I agree.
I mean, these are like, honestly, 2 of my favorite movies. Like it was like you picked this for me.
Well, I didn't, but thank you. Well, but here's the question, though. How does it work as a double feature? I have an answer that may shock you.
Well, I have an answer, a definitive one, because I did watch it as a double feature today.
Okay, all right.
But I watched Blair Witch first, and then I watched Face Off. So maybe the other way around would be better. But it didn't make sense as a double feature, but they were both, I mean, because like I said, I think Blair Witch is fun. I mean, it's not fun in a traditional sense, but it's fun for me to watch because I just like it. I know all the lines. I just enjoy it. I've seen it a million times. So it was just fun to watch both, and it didn't feel like they both flew by, even though Face Off is kind of long. They both just flew by. So I mean,
Face Off does not feel long, even though it is long.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
But like in my mind, they both felt like about the same length, even though Blair Witch is short for a feature length.
Well, that's a weird thing, and I don't mean this in a bad way. Blair Witch feels longer than it is.
Yeah,
and I think it's just because you see the actors or the characters suffer.
Yeah, you get enveloped.
You feel like you're watching them for hours.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I think it worked in the sense that I was entertained and I enjoyed myself the whole way through.
Sure.
But these movies, to me, don't have any qualities that
make
them work together. And yeah. But I enjoyed myself.
I think this has the potential of a really off-the-wall, awesome double feature. However, I would reverse the order, which you apparently did. The reason I would do that is I always say, if a movie's going to be out there and weird, it's got to be the second movie, because that's the one late at night. It's got to keep your attention. Face Off does that in spades.
I agree with that.
It's the longer movie. I usually like the shorter movie being second, but Face Off, because it's so out there, it's so over the top, the acting, the action. And then I think that really ultimately what makes them kind of work together for me is the minimalism versus the maximalism. Like they're like complete polar opposites. But I think watching the two together, that's kind of interesting. You see these are both kind of blockbuster films made around the same time. And one of them is dirt cheap, and you're watching it, you almost feel like you're involved in the filmmaking process because you kind of, what you're talking, like we talked a lot about like how they did certain things. And Face Off, you're just along for the ride. You're letting John Woo, Nicolas Cage, and John Travolta just take you on this fantasy.
And also, in Blair Witch, there is this mythology and all that, but the story that the movie is telling is incredibly simple. It's basically just people getting lost in the woods. The story that Face Off is telling is incredibly complicated.
Almost needlessly so.
Needlessly complicated.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely a yin and yang to it for sure.
All right. Well, Feck, thank you for joining me.
Of course.
Listeners, thank you for joining me, and this is what we're going to be doing next week. We've got Jim returning, and we will be doing The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb from Hammer Films, and Puppet Master 2 from Charles Band, perhaps a 5-star film, another 5-star effort from him. Ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next time.